At 6 p.m. on Wednesday, November 16th, I am calling the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School Board meeting to order. I am Holly Derlo Babcock. I'm just going to quickly go around and have people introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Corey.
Andrew Corey, Superintendent of Schools.
Gina Bergslag, Assistant Superintendent.
Krista Whalen, Board Member.
Cindy Van Conant, Board Member.
Tom Enright, board member.
Gracie, you can introduce it if you want to. Go ahead. It's on. Just say your name.
Patrick West, principal of the middle school. Tim Gerzone, principal of the high school.
Kate Stoll, board member.
Great, thank you. Tom Solon, I assume, will be joining us. He's our assistant chair. I think he's probably running a little late. And Beth Williams texted today that she will not be attending. So, at this point, I need to appoint a process observer. Is there a volunteer among my peers? Tom? Thank you. That was volunteering. It was very enthusiastic volunteering. Mr. Enright will be doing that. Thank you. Tom E. And do we have any agenda adjustments
I
today?
do not.
Great. Anyone else have anything that needs to be adjusted? Great. Okay, so we'll move on to nominations, resignations, retirements, and correspondence. I believe that is you.
Yes, I have two retirements. The first one is from Dorothy Ball at the middle school. She'll be retiring at the end of this year, June 30th, 2022. So I need a motion to accept Dot's retirement with regrets. She's done a wonderful job for us, and I thank her.
Should we do that right now?
Yep.
Okay, so I need a motion to accept Dot Ball's retirement with regrets.
So moved.
Moved by Krista,
Second.
seconded by Kate. Any comments? I mean, how long has she been here? A long time. A long time. So obviously, we appreciate her service to our district and all the great work that she's done with so many kids. All in favor?
The second one, I have a retirement, also from the middle school, from Janet Lash. Janet has been teaching Spanish for 25 years, and she'll be retiring at the end of this school year. So we want to thank Janet for all her service and wish her well.
Great, so I need a motion to accept Janet Lash's retirement with regrets. So moved. Moved by Cindy.
Second.
Second by Krista. Again, another person who's been here for 24 years, 25 years, and has spent a lot of time with our students, and we appreciate her service. All in favor? I believe we're at 5, right? 5-0. So those motions both carry.
And that's it for nominations, resignations, retirements, and correspondence.
Great, thank you so much. At this point, we're going to move on to the approval of the minutes from the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School Board meeting of October 19th, 2022. I have the following amendments. Page 7, line 26, delete the period following finance. Page 8, line 44, replace the period with a comma following vans. And page 9, line 41, insert remarks before she.
So moved.
Okay?
Second.
So moved by Kate, seconded by Cindy. I believe we were all present, so at this point, I'll take a vote. All in favor? 5-0, and Mr. Solon is just arriving at 6:04 p.m. So I'm going to put you as an abstention, Tom?
Thank you.
Thanks. So 501. Okay, we have non-public meetings of October 19th, 2022. So I just need a motion to accept as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Krista,
Second.
second by Cindy. And again, all in favor? 6-0, great. Terrific. So we are a little bit ahead of schedule for public input, but we will start it at 6:05 and extend the public input from 6:05 with technically, we will open it and close it, but if someone comes in between 6:10 and 6:40, we will allow them to give us their public input at a time during the meeting that we see fit. So at this point, just so people understand, those people who have interest in having some public input, this is not a back and forth between the board and the person of the public. We're just here to listen to what you have to say. Please state your name and address for the record, and you're allotted 3 minutes to speak, and do so respectfully. So at this point, I will open the floor for public input at 6:06 PM.
Thank you. I'm Mike Levitt from 125 Moore Hill Road. I'm here representing the Energy Committee tonight. I had a few words with Cindy before this, so I know that you guys are already kind of ahead of the curve on this, but we were looking at what we've done over the last 10 years, which started out with a rather extensive energy audit for the school buildings and all the other buildings in town. And we were thinking that this might be a good time to try and update that or get a new audit done. I understand that you've already got that in your plans. You've made some requests for the money from the state to do it. There are other things that we could also do, other ways we could do it if that doesn't come through, but wanted to find out if you guys would be interested in that. Also, we've instrumented the electrical systems in both these buildings, high school and the middle school. And we've been collecting data, and we're beginning to analyze it, and we would like to come forward perhaps with some recommendations. Also, perhaps ask for a little bit of help to allow us to get more detailed data, which would require just the help of the maintenance folks who understand the way the systems are working in the schools. That's basically what I wanted to say, and hopefully you guys, as I understand, are already looking in that direction. There are ways of reducing your costs, and some of it can be quite significant. The elementary schools are a good example of that. So with that, I'm done unless you have any questions.
Thanks so much. You're from the Hollis Energy Committee, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we're good. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Is there any other public input? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public input at 6:08. However, as I said, anyone who comes in the next 32 minutes will have an opportunity to give us public input when we see fit. Okay. Thank you. All right. So I think we're up to principals and athletics reports. So I'm going to let you guys decide, and principal, athletic, and student council report, right?
Gracie, go first.
Do you have a report? Do you have a report today? No. You don't have to go first. But are you planning on? Are you planning on reporting today, or were you just coming to listen? Because you don't. It's up to you.
I can have like a brief report.
Okay. Okay. Do you want to go first, or would you like to go after the principals?
Go first.
Oh, good for you. Okay.
Okay, so in student council right now, we are working on our Spirit Week since we're completely revamping basically everything we've ever done. We've always done a traditional play, I guess. We have a dance element, we get volunteers, and we do posters. But over the past few years, because of COVID, we believe that there's a lack of participation. So we wanted to revamp it to something that more students will actually participate in and enjoy. So we decided to do kind of I'm not sure if you heard, other schools, they do powder puff games, but we decided we didn't want to do exactly that. So instead we're just doing a school-wide dodgeball tournament with a Just Dance break in the middle. So we're going to do a halftime show, which will have other traditional Spirit Week activities.
That sounds cute.
Yeah, and so we've been kind of just in the phases of planning that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And we've just been going through, we're going to keep our poster elements, so there'll still be something for everyone to do if you're not exactly athletic traditionally. But either way, it's supposed to be a very chill, competitive, but in a fun, spirited way type of day. So yeah, that's pretty much what we've been working on.
That sounds great, Grace. Thank you so much.
So wait, is this dodgeball tournament?
Yes.
So is it students against
Faculty?
We actually did talk about that. We're not sure if that's actually going to go through. It'll probably be grade versus grade.
I think that's a great
and then
idea.
we'll figure out if the faculty would be interested in doing that. I'm not quite sure yet. So.
Are you advocating for that, Kate?
I think it's a great idea.
Great, thanks, Grace, that's great. And then I guess we can move first to the athletic report, since it's in here first, and then move on to, because you guys have class sizes, so I'd rather kind of do the athletics first.
Sure, I'll try swing at the athletic report. Big congratulations to our middle school girls soccer team for winning the Division II Tri-County League Championship. It looks like it's their second in a row, and Mr. Grisone, you might be able to speak to it, but I think they won a few before the pandemic, and if the pandemic wasn't here, they probably would have had a good shot. So a nice little run for the middle school girls soccer team. The high school athletics season officially come to an end. It looks like there were 4 teams that made their respective Final Four NHIA state tournament: field hockey, boys soccer, girls volleyball. The field hockey, boys soccer, and girls teams each lost close games in the semifinal rounds, while the girls volleyball team took the undefeated Bedford the distance, but unfortunately fell short to a 3-2 loss. The unified soccer team closed out their season on a loss to Conval on the road. Cheer and cross-country teams both had strong performances with young teams in their respective state championships. The winter season is underway, started up at the beginning of November. Middle school, going back to middle school, again, the girls won their championship. The boys and the boys soccer team and the field hockey teams both lost, unfortunately, in upsets in the semifinal round. Cross-country team had very strong performances at their league meet and the meet of champions. Both the boys and girls teams finished third place. While the boys finished third at the meet of champions, the girls finished 6th. Again, winter sports are underway for the middle school, and our basketball teams had their first scrimmage tonight. It looks like the high school tackled some hunger by raising over 500 pounds of non-perishable items, and that was shared with the Milford Share Pantry. And just a few coaching openings still at the high school and at the middle school.
And it looks like there were some coaches hired as well, so that's great.
Ski team, yes. I'll just dive right into my middle
Sure,
school
that's
principal's
great,
report.
thank you. Well, first, before, just congratulations to all the teams in the fall, whether they ended up winning championships or did not. I personally want to just congratulate them for their participation and their involvement in our schools. Anyone else? Okay. Well, maybe somebody wants to congratulate all the winners. I didn't know. But I do congratulate all the winners, too. Okay, go ahead, Patrick.
So the month of October, we had a lot going on that month. We try and talk to students a little bit about bullying prevention, treating others with kindness, making healthy choices. Students had the opportunity to participate in a whole different bunch of activities, but one was the Healthy Habits Bingo game, which was a local gift card to a local business. Sorry, a gift card to a local business. We finished the month with Red Ribbon Week, which was dedicated to drug use prevention and making healthy choices. The picture in the middle there is a picture from one of our 8th grade students with his drone.
Oh, cool.
Yep, very nice picture, very nicely done. And then there are some pictures there as well from our Halloween Red Ribbon Theme Week dress-up days, which a lot of students participated in this year, as well as staff. We're getting back into field trips. Team Da Vinci took their group of 8th graders down to the Freedom Trails on November 9th. Students were tasked with researching a location of the Freedom Trail, presenting to classmates about their respective location, and they also got to explore Faneuil Hall and other locations in Boston. We had our Veterans Day Assembly last week, which we had a really nice turnout. That's one of the pictures we were able to take. It was a really nice presentation from Mr. Chris Lucier on his collection of flags, and Mr. Bruce Moran, who read his Old Glory. Both presentations were very powerful, and the students did a very nice job at the assembly. And overall, I think the assembly was well received by the veterans and the students and the staff. We did invite the veterans back to the middle school in March before we head down to Washington, D.C. I think that was a something that happened before 8th graders would go down to Washington DC. We invite the veterans in and just talk to them about different places that we'll be visiting down in Washington. So we're getting that back and going. And I apologize for the typo in the personnel update. We are still accepting applications for our technology ed teaching position. And our class sizes are attached and some upcoming dates.
Thank you, Patrick.
Do you want me to dive into my class sizes?
I think that would be great. I mean, that's when we're talking about it, so sure.
Okay.
But before you do that, actually, are there any questions on the first part of Patrick's board report? I just quickly, so the Team Da Vinci went on this field trip. Can you refresh my memory? 7th grade or 8th grade?
That's 8th grade.
Okay, and the other team is,
Bartlett.
that's an 8th grade team too?
That's an 8th grade team.
And will they be doing a similar field trip? Like,
We're working-
is that how it kind of works? Like,
So teams don't always necessarily have the same
Same,
exact
okay.
experiences. Similar experiences, not always the same.
Okay.
But we are working with Team Bartlett to see if possibly Boston Museum of Fine Arts.
Okay.
But there is an appetite for us to figure something out for Team
Okay.
Bartlett.
okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, so any other questions on that part of the board report? Okay, so class sizes, yeah, I'd love to sort of hear your summary or your take on them.
Sure. As you'll kind of quickly see, as you get down to band and chorus, especially our chorus numbers, chorus seems to be back where it was pre-pandemic. Students very interested in taking chorus and band, definitely more so chorus. So the demand of chorus sometimes kind of impacts other classes with having class sizes that big. It's just going to kind of waterfall effect into some other classes. Also with our math classes that we offer, a lot of our students that take chorus and are in our higher level math courses sometimes restrict what classes students can take at certain times. So that's why you'll start to see some of our classes halfway down the first page. Art 8 has a class size of 25. So we are mindful of that. We're trying to think of different ways next year, possibly either adding more sections of chorus or maybe making a section of 7th and 8th grade chorus, just to be able to provide more flexibility when creating student schedules. So those are kind of the two big ones. Just, again, the chorus demand and the math demand. Those are kind of more of electives, not necessarily electives, but students get to choose to take those classes. And that's just why some of our classes are starting to have different class size ranges.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Tom.
Are any students going up to the high school for any math programs this year?
Not this year.
Okay. And how is the individualized reading delivered?
How is it delivered?
Yeah, I see the sizes are very small, and there's a number of them. What defines how those groupings take and who?
Usually those are our identified students
Yeah.
that require individualized programming, or that might be below grade level in terms of reading. So there's a lot of data that we reference when making those decisions, but a lot of times those are our identified students that just need a little extra support.
But just, so those are grouped by similar student needs. So some of them require the one-on-one, and some of them can be in a small group, but they have this, they're receiving a similar service versus another small group that has a slightly different need within that.
And are they generally taught by employees who are considered part of the special education
Yes.
faculty?
Yeah.
And do we have appropriate spaces for doing that?
Yes.
We're not having to, because at one point we had issues of finding room to do small group instruction. So I make sure we're not in that situation.
Nope.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions? Patrick, how did these numbers, this is kind of, I hate to, and if you don't have this answer, you can give it to me next month, but like, the whole point for us doing this is we look at class sizes in May, and then we look at them again in October. And so, did you see a big change in what you were kind of projecting or planning for
Not a
versus
huge
what?
change. No, I
Yeah.
think with the transition of seventh graders coming into the middle school, some are just unsure, a little apprehensive of what classes they want to take. So the chorus one, we expected about 25, but we just noticed that there was just kind of a higher demand than we had anticipated back in May. So that's why those numbers are a little bit higher than we would like, but, I mean, 25 to 29 isn't a huge jump.
Right.
But that's why we're kind of looking into the possibility of having a seventh and eighth grade section, because they essentially do pretty much the same thing.
And when you say it waterfalls, that's why we might see some smaller sections in like a general music per se, because those
Correct.
students who, that's just our music. It's you either take chorus, general music, or band. So a large number in one's gonna mean that they're gonna have less numbers in the others.
Correct.
So that's math.
Yes.
I'm really good at that.
How's our headroom situation? Do we have any areas where we are starting to bump up against limitations where our policy says we can't put more students into any programs?
Are you, in terms of like chorus not being higher than 30 and PE being higher than,
Or that, or the science, or math, or
Is there any place that you're seeing us bumping? You just mentioned chorus and the couple of
Yeah.
math classes are concerns.
as you can see by some of those class sizes, 25 is really where we max out for our regular ed classes. I believe chorus and PE, we allow for up to 30.
Yeah.
math or science?
Science is limited to 24, but we have not
Oh, sorry.
gone past, and that's just a lab rule, but we have not, we've hit 24 once in 7th grade and once in 8th grade, I believe, but that's just a function of all of their other selections.
Right.
So if we see an influx coming in, we've still got capacity.
You do.
Okay.
Great. Are there any other questions? Thanks, Patrick. Thank you so much. We'll move on to Tim.
All right.
So like Patrick and the elementary schools, we too celebrated Veterans Day just last week. We had a full week of activities. We welcomed in the veterans into our civics classes where they had an opportunity to sit with the veterans, offer questions, and the veterans had time to tell personal stories about their experiences serving in the military. The Homefront Club, NHS, and Red Cross all teamed up to take part in the holiday card signing. Just yesterday I popped in, I think it was Red Cross had an after-school activity, full room of kids signing cards for our troops overseas. So, and then the assembly itself was one of the best that I remember. Mr. Lucier that Patrick had referred to provided the keynote speech this year, and our Homefront Club was part of the process in deciding what the speech was about, which was about standing for the flag, and it was a very moving speech. The kids were great. The ceremony overall was a huge success. So really a great week celebrating veterans in our community. We had a Halloween assembly, back to HP tradition.
Who's that shark? That is
That
such
shark
a good
there, yeah, that
costume.
is one of our senior boys there. Yep. And overall, a really fun week. It was a great feeling around the school. The actual day was Friday, going into Halloween weekend, and having been at the high school for a while, that is always a fun day. I know the kids look forward to it, and the staff participation was as high as it's ever been. So it was a really fun day throughout the week as well. And we had spirit days leading up as well. So it was a really good, a good experience for everyone. I just want to highlight on the back here we have. We welcome back the Performing Arts Department. Welcome back an alum, Liam Grant, came through and met with our classes and talked about his experience as as a performer, now as an HB alum, and offering the perspective for students. So he did performances with all the classes throughout the day, and also offered an evening performance in our auditorium. So it was nice welcoming Liam back. And I also wanted to mention tomorrow night, we have our parent-teacher conference, the first part of our parent-teacher conferences, and we also have Monday, the upcoming week, Monday evening parent-teacher conferences as well. So I am open to any questions or comments on any of the report before I dive into the class size report.
Any questions for Tim on the first part of his report? Great job. Congratulations to, obviously the Veterans Day, and we appreciate their involvement, but also to the student council who really helped put together that Halloween assembly. Is that correct? Is it student council?
Yeah, it was the juniors, I believe.
Junior
Right,
students.
Gracie?
Good job. And, yeah, that's great. And I think it's great that we have alumni coming back in. So that's awesome. Okay, so would you like to give us your take on your class sizes? And this is a little bit more complicated than the middle school because the kids have so many more choices, clearly.
Yep. So I just wanted to, I'll point out a few things, and then obviously we can, if you guys have any questions or we can discuss things, obviously we can go over all that stuff afterwards. First off, I wanted to point out a few courses that are combined, listed separately, but are actually combined courses. We have our Honor Senior Quest and Senior Quest. That's a course that is overlapped. We have our AP Art and Design is combined with our Drawing 1 courses, as is our Guitar and Guitar 2. So those courses overlap. They are listed separately here. I wanted to point out also, upon request from the board, I did list at the end of the report the CTE numbers by school, by course, and then by school. So we can certainly dig into those if you guys want to talk further about those. I wanted to point out that we had a couple anomalies that I just wanted to highlight before. I'm sure they stood out to this group as well. We had within our schedule, and this is something that can be difficult to predict, but at the same time, I think as we move forward, after Power School produces what the computer determines to be the optimal schedule, there is an opportunity to fine-tune some things, and offering electives on the bookends, periods 7 and period 1, can create for some smaller sections. So we had some classes, including outdoor adventures and some of our personal fitness classes that ended up running period 1 and period 7, and then that created some smaller sections. And then unfortunately what happens is senior options in the middle of the day, there's a limited number of electives to take. So in moving forward, taking a finer tooth comb after the Power School runs its schedule and moving some more electives into the middle of the day, I think will not only improve the numbers, but also provide students more opportunities in the middle of the day for those type of options. And I also wanted to point out another anomaly. If you notice, our civics and economics courses, those are semesterized courses that typically run opposite one another, and some of the sections are imbalanced. You have sections as big as 26 and as small as 8 in some of those semesterized courses, and I just wanted to point out that after recognizing this, so this includes both semester 1 and semester 2, we are currently working on semester 2 numbers. If a student has a study hall opposite, for whatever reason, Power School doesn't balance those numbers, and we're able to hand schedule. So at this point in time, a swing as many as 4 students in a smaller section, adding 4 students in a smaller section and reducing those larger sections by as many as 4. So kind of bringing things closer to the
So you're still
middle.
working on civics and economics, basically?
For the second semester section. So half of those sections are first semester, half of those sections are second semester. And again, this is something that we can learn from and moving forward, make these adjustments. before schedules are sent out, which is the goal is always before students leave in the spring. So once Power School comes up with a schedule, there is a crunch, and that fine tuning, if we allow ourselves, it does come down to days and hours that you have to fine tune things. So knowing what happened this year, I think we can make some improvements moving forward. Nonetheless, they did end up as you see here. So with the exception of civics and economics, where we will make some adjustments to the semester 2 courses, this is where we landed. And as always, I am open to questions and comments.
Anyone have questions?
I was just curious, the senior quest, is that about what you get for numbers every year?
I can certainly go back and check historically. The numbers have been pretty healthy. I want to say last year was 18, and I could actually, I could go back and get numbers for you.
Just anecdotal, I mean, it's such a great opportunity, I think, for students to be, so really applying things that they've learned into an experience and just gaining, knowledge and credit in a different way. So it's nice to see kids use it.
Absolutely, it is a great course. I'll get those numbers for you.
And so, just for the public, if they were to view this, like, I know, for example, it's really important, we're looking at these numbers in October, but again, so for an example, just because I have a personal experience with it, like AP Gov has 12 students in one section and 6 students in another. So that seems kind of silly that we have 2 sections. We could just have one, but I believe that the requests that were made in the spring were
Yeah, we
were
had 33 requests for the course
33
in the
requests.
spring.
So when you plan for the requests, that's an example of, it's an important example of how the numbers change from May to October.
Yep,
So
they can ebb and flow, and that AP US Gov, the smaller of the 2 sections is running period 7. Again, that's something that I think with some hand scheduling, we could improve that.
For next
APs
year.
are tough, and it is a moving target. You had 33 requests, but oftentimes those students are also potentially looking at another AP Humanities course that might end up working better in their schedule because they're also taking another singleton course in
Right.
a different department. So it is difficult to estimate. With 33 requests,
you had to
we
run
had to
2.
go 2.
Right,
yeah.
right.
So-
I understand that.
What's the mechanism for the drop? Is it the schedule that the school produces, or is it that what are the mechanics of, they make requests, then what happens with those requests? Do they then,
So there's a priority in their requests. So they might say, I want AP Gov as my number 1 elective. And then when a schedule is produced, for different reasons, they may or may not make changes to that, or they may or may not have gotten into the course that they requested because of scheduling conflict. So they may have requested AP Gov, and it ran period 7, I don't know what period the other one was, but they may have prioritized taking
no, I understand.
AP
okay.
Calc, the same 2 periods, and it was left out in the cold.
So when, at least when we produce the schedule that's going to them is saying, this is what we come up with to answer your set of requests, do we, it sounds like we don't, if there's 33 requests, it's not likely that there are going to be all 33 recommended to take that. Is that a fair
It's hard, that's the difficulty, because if you were to say, okay, we're gonna run 1 section, then you could be in a predicament where you have 28 kids.
No, but even if you leave it at 2 or 3 or 100, but there's going to be, of the 33 requests, I would suspect that not 100% of them were their first requests. And that of those who requested them, that wasn't the best optimal fit that the software comes out. So let's say it's 33 requests. It's likely that it's going to be something less than that as recommendations for the first pass schedules. Is that true?
Somewhat. I think that that's likely.
Yeah, okay.
I would say that you also run the risk, and we have these situations where you might say, in this exact example, run one section, and for whatever reason, that ends up being a class that you end up telling kids that, no, you can't take this because we only ran one section, and then you're limiting access to that particular course. And in this instance, it could be something that, upperclassmen might wanted to take, and now they're not going to. So, you would prioritize the seniors, and then you get into, juniors that.
At what point do we implement policy and say that the class is too small, so I'm sorry, you're not going to get it? We're not going to offer it.
I think it would be too late by the time you're talking September, October, because like, for example, that AP Gov class that's 6 kids started with 9 kids in September. So 3 kids dropped it even after school started, because they chose to, it's not a requirement, it's an elective.
Right.
So they
And
just
it's
chose.
not a
to-
capstone course
Right,
either.
so they just chose, it was probably 7th period, and they chose, I mean, I don't know, I'm not 100% sure, but that's
What's
only
our
hearsay.
threshold? But what's
That's only
our-
hearsay, I
what's
don't
our-
know for sure.
What's our threshold? Isn't it less than 10?
But it's based on request, isn't it? Like,
No, it's
no.
based on enrollment.
right. We can't cancel classes after we start
No,
school.
but if you only had 9, you could cancel, you could drop it down to one section at that point and tell some of the students
Right.
that we're not going to offer it. I think it's a philosophical question of, at what point do we say, I'm sorry, I know you want it, but not enough other people do? And a policy has a number. Are we using the policy? Are we abiding by our policy is the question I have. It doesn't sound like it.
I would say we abide for it when we start the process. But what I'm hearing you say is when we get to August, if it doesn't meet the policy, you would prefer that we cancel the class.
I would prefer at the time when we are making the offers and suggestions to students, if before we're committed to actually having that class. There are going to be instances when kids don't get into classes that they ask for because their schedules don't allow it. There are going to be situations where they don't get into classes because they're over-enrolled or there's over-demand. But I don't hear often that we are saying there are kids that don't get into classes because they're under-enrolled based on policy. So
I think we'd have to have a longer conversation about that, because the kids get their schedules in May.
I
Like,
think that
they
an
get
additional
their-
challenge is.
they get their schedules
So
in
if you're
May.
going to remove that class.
Now you have a
do you do
teacher
with
that's,
staff?
you have a
Yeah.
staff member who's just sitting there doing nothing, because that's
So
their
Right,
if
class.
that's
you
what I
have
was
9
gonna
kids
say.
that are going to take the class,
Right.
that's the default.
The decisions about staffing and the decisions about how the schedule's going to be built are based on the requests. And so that, all that work's done, then you get to a point where now it's August and you're down to 6 or 9 or whatever, and because of the way it plays out, like you could have 9 in one section, but you could have 16 in the other section, so now you're already at max, and so, yeah, those decisions have already been made.
well,
I just think
and
canceling
then they've
classes would
then
be
they have also-
disastrous.
And then, but you also have the situation where that teacher is qualified and capable of perhaps teaching another course that has large class sizes.
I guess that's true.
I mean, we front load the optimization by the way we write it. And granted, it's work, but I guess the question is, why why have the policy if we're not using it?
Well, we can bring that to policy and look at it, and maybe
No,
we can change that sentence so that we don't break policy.
Well, we've had this discussion, and every time we have the discussion, said, well, it's a longer discussion. We keep kicking the can. We have this every year, and we never do anything about it. Is there any appetite to do anything about it? And if there isn't, then I would say, get rid of the policy. Because if we're not going to use our minimums, we had the strong discussion about the maximums recently. If we're not going to be using the minimums, why have them? Because they're going to get waved in our face.
It's a valid point.
But we have canceled a few classes, mostly the French. We had 3 students 2 or 3 years ago that we said that they couldn't do
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
We have done it. The other thing we can discuss is when signups are at 33, do we just only offer one section? And see where that takes us. Because I do agree, wherever that class ends up, if it ends up 1st to 7th, it's not going to be a very large class, because once I can choose senior options, I'm probably going to take that option. That's why I think Tim was alluding to, we need to make sure we're not scheduling electives 1st and 7th, because those class numbers are going down all the time. So we learned that this year, as well as maybe we need to take a harder look at the number of sections we schedule. When it comes out to be 33, it sounds great at 17 and 16, but I think what we've learned historically is we get a group of students who decide not to take that. And if we had to, survive with a larger section, I'll use, Algebra 1 honors, if all of a sudden that's 26, 27, but every student in there wants that class, it's a different teaching environment than 27 of something that maybe students didn't want.
And the most expensive thing that we have in our entire school system is salaries and benefits.
Correct.
And enrollment has dropped. We have not compressed our offerings any, and I'm not suggesting necessarily that we compress the offerings, but we have spoken many times about perhaps taking some courses that are less well enrolled and offering them on alternate years kind of thing. Some of those techniques. I've yet to see it, I shouldn't say I've yet, I haven't seen it employed in a long time. It's been a number of years since we've employed that. If we are looking that in the large scale, our staff level is out of balance with our enrollment numbers, we have an obligation to look at that balance.
Anybody else? Do you have something to say,
It's
Krista?
a good point. I mean, it's hard to argue with that. And, I like the idea of if we have 33, then maybe offering it one time. But when would, I'm trying to understand, I want to make sure I understand the process. So we have 33 kids sign up.
In
They
February.
don't sign up, they express it on their request list as somewhere that's a class that they would like to take.
Okay. In February. So then, and we look at it and say, we hand out schedules in May based on those requests. So we'd have to say 8 kids.
Potentially, yeah.
You would potentially say 8 kids couldn't take the class. You'd have 25 in one section.
You also have a window, it doesn't have to be 100% mechanical. You can, if you're getting the requests in February and you're sending the schedules in May, at some point during that, I would expect that you could run, probably have run a couple of efforts at schedules prior to that, and you can get flags and say, hey, this
They
is
do
what
all
it's
that,
looking
yeah.
at. You put it on your list, but it's not looking good. to put you in the class. Or, you know, they also put multiple, you said multiple priorities. How often do we use that option to eliminate a section? So, yes, it was their first choice, but not everyone's gonna get their first choice, but their second choice is available. I don't know the process, and I don't know, I'm asking.
And how do you decide who gets the class? So like you say seniors get it, but do you say kids who have 6 AP classes don't get to take that one, but kids who have no AP class, like how do you make that
Well,
decision?
The way that the computer would do it is.
Computer
it
just-
Would say, it goes for the highest total rank. So
Right.
it assigns points for first place, points for second place, points for third. It's like ranked voting, and you go for the highest total. So if you could give everybody their second choice, but you could only give 50% of the people their first choice and everyone else didn't get anything that was
Yeah,
on
so
it.
they don't rank their choices that way. They literally list their
don't?
first 7 requests, and then they have 2 alternates.
Yeah, so for,
They don't
you have
rank their
your,
requests.
Oh, okay.
They don't, yeah.
you have, when you get to the junior and senior year and you have electives, those are the courses that you can list as your top request, or, you know, you can prioritize which ones you want. If, for example, you know, you're talking about elective courses though, not necessarily, you know, you're not talking about your math. However, it does come into effect when you have kids looking to take multiple science courses or multiple humanities courses. You would look at what the priority is and then what fits in their schedule.
Or what is required.
Yeah, what's required,
mean,
but obviously.
because, yeah.
Yep,
I mean, sometimes this, you know, kids wait until their senior year to take a couple of the courses that are required, that are elective type courses. so
Yep,
that-
and if that's running at a period that one of their, you know, they sign up for AP Gov, and AP Gov is gonna be the one that doesn't happen, because
Right.
that's not something that they necessarily need to graduate.
Is this list, like on the video game design, you have an 8 and 11, but is that a 2-semester? I can't, is it?
I can double check.
Because I know before when we've looked at some of these numbers, sometimes they're the half semester, or I mean, the half year.
I believe video game design is a semesterized course. Let me just double check.
Because just looking at it from here, you would think, oh, well, there's only 19 kids, but it could, if that's 2 different semesters, that's a whole different way to look at it.
Where is video game design? Under what?
It's actually like the fourth.
first page.
Computer.
First, yeah.
Very first page.
It's it's running 2 separate periods, actually, in the same semester. And again, that's a result of how Power School would create the best case scenario for that to run, and it ended up with 19 kids taking it first semester in 2 different periods.
Okay. So there's nobody signed up for second semester for video game? Or
Video-
they can take it,
Video game is not being offered semester 2.
okay.
Yeah, it's tricky because we kind of make these decisions based on requests, and then you see the enrollment numbers, which is why it's important to see, then it would be good to see both, actually, you know, like May to October, like see the, almost next to each other.
The
Yeah,
spreadsheet that I share in May.
yeah, I mean, we have it, so we can look at it, but we should be kind of looking at both of those, because that's, so I understand I agree, Tom, like, looking carefully during the request time to make sure that we are not ending up in this situation and making those predictions, which is what Tim was saying, like, looking and seeing where the problems are. You've noticed where the problems are. You have the red flags too.
You can start to identify
you can
certain
start to identify,
trends that
Right,
are
concerns.
predictable.
Right. I mean, we have like advanced writing at 8 kids, like that's a small number, right? So, but I would not feel comfortable as a board having kids be told in August that they can't take a class because the enrollment has dropped. I would be fine if we have these conversations in May, but I would struggle with like how you make decisions for which kids get to take which classes. Because I think you could end up with a little bit of a dog-eat-dog thing if you have 33 kids sign up and you're like, okay, well, we're not going to offer 2 sections of AP Gov, which is a class that for some kids, that's the class they've been wanting to take for 4 years. So like, you know, how do you figure that out?
And when you run singleton sections, especially at the high end, that becomes very challenging for students, for it to work in a student's schedule.
Yeah, because it's only offered one period, and
Yeah.
if they have to take honors choir, which is offered at the same period, or honors jazz band, or like, that's the thing
Yeah,
that
then
they,
you end up
then they
choosing
end up
one
having
over
to
another.
choose. And that's okay, because kids have to make
Yep.
choices, but it can create a lot more tension than is necessary.
And, you know, and then fewer opportunity.
Yeah,
Is it common practice for students to get their schedules before they leave school, just in general?
in our school, they get them in May.
I know,
Yeah.
I
I don't remember.
Yeah,
I would say the process is similar at many of the schools that I would compare us to.
so they do get it, they don't get them over the summer, closer to the start of school?
I think there are some districts that do that. That's why I said, you know, that they're comparable to us.
The challenge for us is that, so, and I don't know if this is true for other districts, but like, there's not a lot of things that kids can do over the summer because the guidance department isn't fully in place, right? Like, they're professional staff, so
Yeah,
they're not,
and
so they're not
the
in.
department chairs are part of the process as well. And
Right.
when there's a back and forth dialogue about scheduling and creating
Right.
sections and making sure teachers are whole and having
Right.
all sections filled to their optimal level.
Right.
Those conversations are with chairs that's not a,
Right.
And so now, when do those discussions take place? In June?
through the end of the school year. So in, you know, March, April, May, and then in May is when I present this.
When do kids solidify their
But
schedule?
what I was trying to point out is, when kids get their schedule in May, they have time before the end of the school year to go and see their guidance counselor to work through something that, when they see their schedule, that they don't.
Their schedule's handed out later than that.
Is it June?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so they get it.
When do you consider their schedule locked, other than the anomaly where someone comes in and really petitions, because that can happen anytime during the
A
year?
student's schedule, an individual
Yeah.
student's schedule?
Yeah,
I mean, the add drop period ends, I think it's, the language is 5 days into the quarter, after the 5th day or something to that effect.
so it's in September.
Yeah.
So does that mean that we are regularly dealing with course shuffling in the beginning of school,
What do you mean by course shuffling?
where someone's coming in and saying, I want to change my schedule?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So we have some options. If we're going to this effort to get everything done for the summer, before the summer hits, we have the option of locking things in earlier, or conversely, if we have this period in the beginning of the year anyway, when they can do it, it gives you this, we could take the summer to make adjustments. They can change, it surprises me that it's unilateral, that the kids can make changes in September, but the school can't.
Well, we can, it's just
Well,
you've already committed your staffing level.
We don't give ourselves the permission.
No, I think you have, but you have to understand that you've already committed back in March to your staffing levels.
And you've already committed your staff to certain classes, so when you say a staff member can switch from teaching AP Gov to something else, you need to give them more than just a September 1st. Or you could definitely not. You could certainly say September 1st, you're not teaching AP Gov, you're teaching another section of civics. You could do that, absolutely. But that's a really hard thing as a teacher, to like get thrown like
It's not
that.
gonna happen a lot. We're
Right.
probably talking 1 or 2 situations a year. We're not talking about the whole thing, but I do think it's important that we, if we're looking at it in a matchup situation as far as staffing level versus student level, that should be happening much earlier. That should be happening for the March timeframe, when we're offering contracts. So,
That's when you come out with, Tim has explained, in February, when you start doing the signups, that's what you're basing your teacher's schedule on. And then what happens is, you have that many kids who decide to take senior options or come in and decide that I really don't want to have Mr. Gazone for that class, so I'm going to take something else. And those are the changes that you can never factor in. So that's how something at 9 or 10 goes down to 5 or 6, and then it looks like, why are you offering that?
just sounds like the tail's wagging the dog in this situation.
Well, I think my comfort level would be go back to policy.
Yeah, I was like, where can we go from here?
Yeah, is to go back to policy, and then, because in the policy, you may want to decide that you're only going to tell Power School it's going to be one section, not two.
Right, like we can decide that we want to stick by our minimums, or we can change our minimums, or we can talk about that, so.
So
I
if you
think
had
the way
three-
it's written now is that there's a notification to superintendent when it's above or
Right.
below, and then there's determination on adding staff or reducing sections, something to that.
Right.
We can take it back to policy and revisit all this. Oh, I'm sorry, Tom.
I'm kind of on the outside of this conversation because you're ahead of me in what's going on in the past. But listening to it, it does sound like the tail's wagging the dog, and that I'm not understanding why we can't make decisions a little bit earlier.
So just the process, teachers make recommendations for students to move on in their coursework after the midterm and the second quarter is done. That's about as early as a teacher will be able to, comfortably and accurately make an evaluation on what the most appropriate next step is for a student. And after the course recommendations go in, that's when students can go in and select and start to identify what the courses that they want to take for the next year. And that's that February timeframe.
Okay, you just pointed out that I am way behind in this.
If you
And I
can't,
thought I was.
that's about as early as, like, you would want a teacher making a recommendation for a student halfway through the course for the next year.
Seems if our enrollment has come down and we haven't addressed that from a staffing point of view, that we're not where we should be. But I'm way behind in the conversation, sorry.
Tom, it's the same conversation we were having back when you were on the board. It hasn't changed. It's a philosophical approach to whether, how far we want to go to give students that granular selection option of electives and then fine-tuning the electives, and the only thing that I've seen sort of transition is we now have a more expanded availability of the options of the students to be out of the building, or come either at the beginning or end of the day, the senior options. That was relatively minimal 10 years ago.
So that's really getting in the way.
Well, I don't know if it's getting in the way,
Well, if
in the sense that
if I
from what
want a
Tim's saying, he
particular
can.
course, but I don't want to come in till 10 o'clock or whatever senior options are, I'm probably not that sympathetic as a parent to that situation.
Well, and then we also allowed some junior options too.
Yeah.
Does that impact it?
Wow.
Not to the same degree.
That's more an in-house thing, isn't it? That's not off campus, is it?
No, they can leave.
Kappa, yeah, the same thing, first and seventh.
The only concern that I would have, if you did that based on the enrollment, or the request of the kids, is then they're telling you who you need for staffing and who you don't need for staffing. Because if you had 33 kids that wanted honors lit, and you had 2 teachers that taught honors lit, and you didn't decide just to run one course, then what happens to that teacher? And those contracts are given out in May, April or May.
Right.
So we would have to have those decisions made, and it would be based on the students, appetite at that time. I mean, and then the next year, they may decide they want to take a different course. I mean, I understand what Tom's saying, but I'm not sure how you can streamline it between the student's request, the Power School, the staffing contracts, and everything all together.
And my understanding is this schedule gets run like a gazillion times to see the most efficient way to, a gazillion's probably an exaggeration, but a lot of times, right?
math
It's a bazillion, or I don't even know, it's a lot. So the technology department runs this a ton, right? And you look and you know, and we do have an incredibly small freshman class. Is that true?
Current?
Current. Is it the current freshman class
Correct.
that's very small? So enrollment,
That's gonna be working its way through.
So it's going to work its way through, but
Right.
next year's freshman class is back up to, over 200. So it's that blip. And so a concern is, do you reduce staff to address the enrollment right now, which is a possibility, but then once that class graduates, are you going to find a math teacher, a science teacher,
So all the 3 years that are gonna backfill it currently are very high?
Yes.
so the 8th grade, the 7th grade, and the 6th grade are all
Correct.
high.
Yep.
And you're seeing your 2 elementary districts at their highest enrollment probably in 10 years.
Correct. So it's definitely, unless all of a sudden everyone has a mass exodus out of town, it's a 1-year blip with that group. And so the short-term solution is to address it right now, but then, in 3 years, we're going to be faced with a different problem.
I think it's more complex than that, because I think the balance of what the demand is for electives is likely to fluctuate as well. So there's numbers and there's actual skill sets, so there's a constant shuffle that needs to take place to some degree if we are going to, and again, it becomes, do we staff based on student requests, or do we staff based on what we want to teach, and then let the students pick from what is available and open? It's a compromise, and I think we try to do our best at both.
Right.
I'm just wondering, is there anything that we can be doing with the information that's available and the policies that we have in place to improve it? And if the policies need to change to address the collective goals of the board, then so be it. If the policies are fine for the collective goals and there's only 1 or 2 curmudgeons who don't like it, then tough.
Right. So,
And I don't know where.
perfect. So we will take this, so the policy committee will take this, go back to the class size policy again. We've heard you, and we'll talk about what we can do via policy to make changes. I mean, we have maximums of class size, that could be something to talk about too. So if you want to have the flexibility to say only offer one section when you have 33 requests and we have this magic number of 25, maybe we need to look at that, so that we give ourselves some room, because that's a possibility. So there's things that we might be able to do with class size. We will put it on our list to talk about it. I appreciate this conversation, and I think the administration has heard where you're going from, and I think that that's part of what needs to happen is Tim and Andy and Gina all need to hear that there's a little bit of concern here based on enrollment, so that when May comes around next year, or when March, April may come around and you're kind of toying with 1 or 2, you might lean towards 1 more, just so that we're not having this conversation in October of 2023. So,
It's enrollment and it's balance.
yeah, I understand. I really do. I definitely, I don't like seeing some of these numbers either, and low numbers in certain classes, because it is upsetting for some members of the public, and it's also upsetting for some of us. And I also think that a class of 6 kids is not the best experience for a kid. So, I guess it can be.
It's also on the high end,
Right.
I like the fact that, you know, the mid to upper teens are really nice numbers.
Those are great
When
numbers.
we start seeing the 20s,
Right.
would it give us the ability to reallocate staff?
Right.
To bring those numbers down?
Sure.
So it's not just, I don't want small classes, it's what I
Right.
get optimum
No.
benefit from the great faculty we have.
I think that sounds fantastic. Okay, so we'll talk about it in policy. Sound good? Thank you so much for digging into this, Tim. And great job with it too, because you also sent it to us via a spreadsheet so we could play and like really look, which I did not do that, but I appreciate it. Because it's just not my style. Okay, thank you. And that kind of took us a while. All right, so at this point, oh, and also, Grace, you know, we're done with principal athletic and student council report. So you are welcome to leave. However, you are also welcome to stay and, you know, have any input. Do you have anything to say at this point? No, it's okay. Don't, that puts you right on the spot, so don't worry. Okay, thanks. So we're gonna move on to discussion. Are we late? Well, no, we're not. Look at that. So I asked to put the first item on the, so I'm going to cover that, all
Yep.
right? Is that okay?
Yep.
So under discussion, we have the Articles of Agreement, which we all know last month we saw our attorney had submitted it to the state. We received an email from a constituent because the state had recorded that the Articles of Agreement were changed effective October 1st. However, the vote, October 1st of 2021, and the vote had actually taken place on October 5th of 2021. So the state, it seemed that the state may have made a mistake, so we referred this to our attorney, Jim O'Shaughnessy, and he did in fact go through and follow up and do some research, and everything that he submitted to the state was dated October 5th, 2021, and unfortunately, they must have made some sort of a transcription. So he is now working with the state to get them to change that documentation to be October 5th, 2021. But I wanted the public to be aware that we received an email from a constituent, we followed up, and we're following through with legal counsel to fix that. That's what I wanted to make sure we brought up. Any questions on that? Comments from the board? No? Okay, great. Moving on. Instructional Practice Committee updates. I think that's you, Tim. So sorry.
All right, so the Instructional Practices Steering Committee met just last week, and we had our three subcommittees, the weighted versus unweighted, the grading and assessment, and the advisory subcommittees report out as to where they are. We had a good discussion around all three topics, so I'll start with the weighted versus unweighted, and I know, Holly, this was a committee that you sat on, so
Yes.
feel free to
I would
chime in.
prefer to not comment on it right now, but go ahead.
Okay. So the committee was unable to unanimously decide to remove the practice of weighting certain classes. As you know, we have a list of courses that we weight here, honors courses and AP courses. It was decided that we'll continue with our current practice of a partially weighted GPA. Some of the rationale that they provided behind the decision, through research done within the committee, it was found that many colleges and universities are currently requesting students weighted GPA during the college admissions process, and we wouldn't want to put students at a disadvantage without giving the weighted credit where it's due. As part of the standard practices and upon student requests, our school counselors do meet with students and during the admissions process and recalculate by hand a student's unweighted GPA, so removing the weight from those select courses should a student have taken those. And some students don't take any weighted courses and they have an unweighted GPA. If you don't take the APs and the honors, you already have an unweighted GPA. The next step in the recommendations from the subcommittee that the school's leadership team review on an annual basis as part of our program of studies review, the courses that we do offer for weight, given that the recommendation is that we continue to weight those courses, just to ensure balance between offerings in various departments, and potentially review our procedures around repeating courses that have weight to them, So I actually brought that just back to the leadership team this week, just for a review of the list. We broke it out by departments and looked at, is there a certain student, is there a certain profile student who is, at an advantage or a disadvantage based on the courses that we weight. So it's back internal at this moment, and as part of our program of studies review, should departments want to bring forward or potentially remove weight from certain courses in the departments, that conversation will happen in the spring. And those kind of big picture ideas, I think we discussed, in the summer for program of studies here, before the actual program of studies review.
Yeah, we had a conversation about program studies input from us.
Kind of big picture.
In the summer, yep.
So we would have some of those items
For July, yeah.
for discussion in the summer.
Great. Excellent. Any comments or questions on the weighted subcommittee report, part of this report? You can move on, Tim,
All right,
thank you.
moving on. So grading and assessment, the committee, the subcommittee is working to develop as complicated a topic as grading and assessment is. Their goal is to kind of pare down to develop a statement of purpose for grading, to then kind of guide some of the work. So their goal is to get that done, and then to our internal building leadership team for review, which would then come back to the steering committee at our next meeting, which we're shooting for January. I don't think I mentioned that. So our next goal for the steering committee here, our goal is to be to meet again in the start of the new year. And that was really it. They didn't, although we had a good discussion around grading and assessment, particularly grading at this meeting, the real takeaways were just that they're going to work on this statement based on all of their feedback from the surveys that they sent out. Was that just last year? No, it was just last year. So they sent out surveys to parents, students, and teachers, and in review of all that, their goal is to develop a concise statement on purpose of grading.
Excellent. Are there any questions about the grading and assessment subcommittee, part of the IPC steering committee? No, I'm seeing none. Moving on.
All right, the advisory subcommittee brought forward a recommendation of implementing a home-based cab block to the Monday schedule. Although the committee's recommendation has not been implemented as it was discussed, there were 3 home-based cab blocks scheduled for the first quarter at the high school this fall during our regular Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday cab block sessions. Our building leadership team, as well as our student council, have requested that when we need to pull home-based cab blocks, that be done on a Monday, thus not robbing our regular cab block time for a variety of different purposes that we know to be included in the overarching advisory. So as a step forward, the goal will be to, again, if and when needed, not necessarily as part of our standard schedule, but when needed, utilize a home-based cab block during our Monday schedule. And that would be, if we haven't discussed it at this table, between a period, a morning periods, not to start the day, but kind of tucked in between periods 2 and 3 in the mid-morning. Small contingency from our subcommittee, including myself and one of our teachers that's on the advisory subcommittee, has been taking part in a statewide PLC that includes teachers and administrators from around the state to evaluate effective master schedule models. In our first meeting, which was earlier this fall up at Guilford High School, a couple of the takeaways were no one has a clean and neat version of a cab block. Flex block is a term that's used. No one has a clean and neat version of it. It's an ongoing evolution. Some have their flex block, their cab block, or their version of that academic block combined with an advisory. Some have only the advisory. Some schools like us have only the cab block, the flex block type period in their day, and everyone is looking to improve. A lot of people are in our boat in looking at having that advisory piece, the logistical scheduling piece, and then the actual academic flex block piece as well. So, and no one has it all figured out. And so we have another meeting early December where we'll go back up and people are going to be bringing their current schedules, proposals. So it's a pretty good group. There's, like I said, teachers and administrators from throughout the state who are all kind of in this boat and trying to nail down what works for others, what could work for us. So good, healthy discussion.
And it's just in the discussion phase with you with a group of other people, like, right?
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Are there any questions? I always look to Tom. Let me look over here. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? No questions from this side? No questions
Well, I
from
was
this side?
at the meeting, so I kind of
Yes,
feel like
I feel like I know.
the questions
I
were
asked the
asked.
questions at the meeting too. But Tom was at the meeting. Tom, do you have any questions?
That's because I left early.
Oh, that's right. No, Tom, go ahead.
One of the things that became a clear obstacle or tipping point is schedule. So many things hinge on the schedule. So the question is there any appetite for looking at the schedule overall? It's in the past always been a multi-year process.
Mhm.
If you want to do it, at some point you got to dig in and start.
I think there is.
I'm asking the board.
Yeah.
So, do you want an answer from the board?
Well, I think the board should make its wishes known if it wants to. That's a message, and silence means there's no appetite.
No, I don't. I'd like to hear more, Tim, from what you're experiencing up at the larger, at these
Yep.
conferences these meetings you're going to before I weigh in.
Well,
But-
the point is what was said at the meeting that I was in was that
I know,
if
I
there
was
is
there.
any desire to implement a real advisor,
Mhm.
it cannot be done without disrupting and trashing the existing schedule, basically. I mean, you either add a period, you make it long, you compress periods, but.
Yeah, no, I'm hearing what you're
So-
saying.
So
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
what Tim's working on may provide input to a process, but if we don't have a process underway, I think it'll just be another footnote.
Mm-hmm. I hear you.
I'll be long gone when you finish the schedule, but
Oh, I hope you'll still be on the planet.
Maybe not.
I don't know, I'm talking to you
Scheduling
on.
committees so far.
So I actually do, I mean, I agree with you and Tim, and, I think that, obviously we should be having some, if we are really serious about doing advisory, and I do believe advisory is, I think in the way the world is now, I really do, I'm a big fan and a supporter of us pursuing having an advisory. And I am concerned about a 1 day a week advisory. I do think if you're going to do it, you need to have a little bit more than 1 day a week. And so to me, that means you have to open up the schedule and start looking at the schedule. So I have an appetite for that, if you will. But that doesn't mean that that's my work. It would be your work and the work of your team. So,
Oh,
but
no.
it could be some of our work too.
If you're gonna do a schedule.
No, we would be there too, right?
It's the community, it's
Yeah,
the
everyone, yes.
faculty, it's the board, it's the administration, it's a.
Student, it's a big committee, yep. Anyone else want to weigh in on this?
I'm all set.
we might not have an assistant superintendent, but, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. I mean, we did go through this when we did Cav Block, and we did change the schedule, and, it
Tom,
might be time to look
Were
at
you on the
it.
one that Tim ran? You weren't? Not this Tim?
No, I'm sensing I'm even further behind.
No, no,
So I wasn't gonna
Tim
open my
Kelly.
big
No,
mouth.
the one that Tim Kelly ran. Weren't you on that?
Yeah.
2006.
Because I was in that,
Yeah.
and that was it wasn't easy, but it was a good process. I don't know if everyone would say it was a good outcome, because that created what we have
The skeleton of what we
now. The format, it's been adjusted since then, but we remember we looked at block schedules, we looked at
Oh, yeah, yeah.
the number of periods, we looked at all of these things, we visited schools.
No,
we
you
did
would
a
have,
lot of
it would, it
research.
is a
And
two-year
again,
process.
That's what we did when we did Cap Block. We
Right.
looked at all of that again.
Right.
And I feel like we keep coming back to the same one, so I'm kind of like,
But we have different goals now, it sounds like we've got a new set of metrics that we want to, things that we want to achieve in our schedule. So would that new framework change the outcome? And that's, I think, the question that needs to be answered. If we want an advisory, if you put that as a mandatory element of the schedule, it either displaces something in the existing schedule, or it changes the schedule. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is.
So, if we're having people do all this work around advisory and not doing the groundwork
Yeah, you're
that would
right.
enable
You're
the
absolutely right.
outcome to be implemented, we're doing a disservice to the people who are doing the investigation.
I don't disagree with the point, but I do caution you that you don't know if your outcome is going to impact pieces that you don't want to change, meaning your academic performance.
Right.
So you could decide to change something, and 2 years from now, maybe you don't like your SAT scores or your number of AP scores and all of that. So I'm just
But
recommending being very cautious, because if you added advisory on Monday, all right, which would have some impact to the schedule, but not a monumental impact, then you can gather data about how that's transitioning. Because 5 years from now, the mental health component that we're looking at may not be the same thing. Because what happens all the time in education is we swing that pendulum. My big thing is always trying to keep it from little movements, because you go too far in either direction, you upset the apple cart. So I'm not opposed to doing it, I'm just saying it's,
when you say doing it, what do you mean it?
looking at the schedule, I just think that it may have to evolve over time. So I know there was some discussions about a advisory period, and that might be the next logical step for us to take, because at some point, we should ask the students about it.
So what you'd like to see is sort of that home-based CAV block that was the original idea, which was just gonna go in on Mondays for like 20 minutes, right? Wasn't that the original idea? See if we can, we need to work, we have some pieces that we have to work on in order to get that to happen. We could try to work on that, make that happen, and then collect data for a year or two to see how that impacts our students, how that impacts their mental health, how that impacts their academics, all of that.
Right. Because we may decide that we're taking a CAB block that's academic support to add another advisory, and could add a 8th period of the day for academic support. I mean, one of the things that we have to start to look at is time, because we still always revolve around start and end time. And to me, the end of the day is an opportunity that you could offer classes and do things, but you have to worry about, well, transportation, but it's not required. And at some point, we've got to get into a flexible day where not all students perform first or second period. So if there was an 8th period, would we naturally see children choose that period? Now, some students couldn't choose that period because they're going to choose to play sports. But that's a choice we have to
So like
make.
an optional 8th period.
Right, because then you're also getting
That's
into.
good. back to
It could be
Tom,
even more.
a whole
I
new
mean,
schedule,
it could-
right.
You could have academics off, or activities offered from 8 in the morning to 5 at night.
So
Or 5 in the afternoon.
Yeah, so I think at this point, we need to hear more from Tim, from you, regarding the information that you're gathering from these meetings
the
that you're
different-
going to.
yep.
And then we have a January IPC meeting, so we'll kind of hear back from the IPC committee about where they really are feeling in terms of pushing towards advisory or whatever. And then I think we can have further conversations as to how to move forward. And maybe move forward with, I mean, we know that one of the things that we need to do to get a home-based cab block is have some more conversations with professional staff about that. So, like, those are the pieces that we could work on for next year potentially, and then maybe pilot that. But I think it's really important, as Tom said, that we, those of us sitting here who are going to be here for a little while or hope to be, understand that the potential for opening up the schedule and starting a scheduling committee and having like a significant scheduling committee is a potential possibility. Highly likely. But maybe not tomorrow.
Potential to highly like.
I don't know. I'm just talking here, Tom. Okay, so does that sound like a good plan? You'll give us some more information about what's going on with what you're learning. We'll hear back from IPC after January, and then we can kind of have this conversation again. Does that sound good to you?
If that's what you want, that's fine.
I'm not sensing anybody else is in disagreement, so we're going to move on. Great. Thank you, Tim. Thanks. Budget Committee, I put this on there, just, I was wondering if you could, I don't remember the numbers, so can you go over the guidance?
Okay,
I'm sorry.
that's okay, no, I have it.
I was there, but I'm really bad at Budget Committee. I was just a stand-in.
Okay. The preliminary guidance that was provided by the Budget Committee was $26,864,904. We, in your board packet, had provided you with round 2.1. On Monday night, round 3 will actually go to the Budget Committee. Gina, Kelly, and I met and did the next round actually earlier today. So there'll be new pieces coming out and updated information. Things like tonight's retirements will impact that because those were not known. The other piece is we have, in your board packet, you see a number on the rigging at the high school for the theater. That number is significantly more expensive than what we had originally put in. But at the same time, we were able to learn from the rigging company that if we need to, that can be phased in over time. We do believe that we will be able to meet guidance, but at the same time, when we make changes to the budget, that changes guidance as well. So that's why it's always preliminary guidance working with the Budget Committee. In the addition that you have in your board packet, it's 5.32%, and if the voters were to pass all the warrants, that would be 6.48%. I can assure you that round 3 brings those numbers down closer to 3.5% and 5%. And there's more still to go as we go through our process. One of the things that did come out of the Budget Committee that I did want to mention is there was I don't know if I'd say concern, but there was a question raised just regarding contingency fund. As you know, we used to have a contingency fund. A couple of years back, we decided to eliminate that because of the unreserved fund balance that we're able to keep. The co-op is at 1% is what they're allowed to retain. Hollis and Brookline are at 2.5%, up to 2.5%. I think the Budget Committee was just sharing the potential concern if something monumental was to happen. And let's just use an example while it's fresh in our mind. I don't think any of us would have thought of HVAC units being close to $500,000. So right now, if we had an HVAC unit go or something of that caliber, it would have to come out of the operating budget. So I think the question is, and Kelly will be getting further details on Monday, and I believe Cindy will be there, just regarding, do we want to move back to a contingency fund? If we do, what dollar amount? or do we want to go to an increase in the unreserved fund balance percentage that we retain? I personally think that is a safer way long-term to go. We haven't, when we had the contingency fund, I don't think we used it during that tenure, but it was nice to know it was there. And I don't believe we've dipped into the unreserved fund balance since we've gone to that. If you did 2% of a, $25 million budget, you're talking $500,000 for a unreserved fund balance, which is not outrageous when you think of what costs are becoming for select items. And I do believe it would be something like an elevator or an HVAC or something of that magnitude, a boiler. But the Budget Committee is looking for guidance, and they're looking to see if we will have the appetite to do a warrant article. We aren't there yet for our warrant articles, but I just wanted to put that on everybody's radar so it's not a surprise. To give you,
Just to clarify, did they express a preference between contingency and an increase in the retained fund balance?
I was there, I don't remember that.
I think they wanted the board to make that decision.
I
But
do too, but I think they were leaning toward the unreserved, change the percentage on, because we started with a higher percentage originally, and it got cut at the annual meeting. And so that, I think that's kind of where some of them wanted to go, was just to increase that.
And then it also, when we started with a higher percentage and it was cut, the max was 2.5, but now the max legally we could go up to 5. So we're, by going to 2.5 to match our elementary districts, we are still,
Right.
well within what we're allowed.
Thank you.
Thanks, great. All right, any questions on that besides Tom's? Okay. SAU 41 annual meeting calendar for review, that's just to review it, right?
yes,
That's
I
so
just
we know.
wanted to put it on your radar.
All right, Grace, thank you.
Good night. In terms of the budget calendar, as you can see, is provided for you. The co-op's school district annual meeting is the 8th with a snow date of the 9th.
What kind of day of the week is the 8th?
One moment.
Yeah,
say
well,
it's Tuesday.
The 8th is a Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday.
Wednesday.
You see all the other dates that we're required for posting notice for the budget hearing.
Public
All of
hearings
those
are Thursday.
is spelled out. They're also there for Hollis and Brookline. As you know, we have to balance the multiple nights out for each of the districts to make this process happen. So I want to thank Kelly for putting this together, and then it was sent off to legal counsel to make sure we were in compliance with all the different dates. But the big dates were just the 8th and the 9th.
Has Hollis voted on their date yet?
They have not. We have kind of moved away from voting on dates, only because if you change one date, you change the entire calendar.
I'm just trying to.
They saw it last month.
Have they voted on the calendar?
They were provided the calendar, we didn't
But
have
they
them
didn't
vote on the
Okay,
calendar.
so I just didn't know if anything was locked yet, other than the SB2 stuff.
I think the whole thing is locked, in my opinion, once it's reviewed by legal. I mean, you can change a date, but then, the whole calendar needs to go back.
Right. Do we know any of the town meeting dates?
I don't have those off the top of my head. I've never,
I just didn't, usually either the school or the town puts a stake in the ground, and I wasn't sure if any other stakes had been planted.
Hollis has been doing theirs on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Hollis is staying on a Saturday because they're using our facilities. And I believe Brookline is after the co-op this year, because that has always been every other year. So last year we were after Brookline, this year we should be before Brookline.
Brookline just has last year's posted.
Right. Yeah, If I was in the town, I wouldn't be producing this calendar probably at this date, but ours is so complex to get all of them to work out and to make sure that we can have the legal attendance at each of the meetings.
And we don't vote on this.
The last few years, we have just brought it forth based on legal counsel's recommendation.
Yeah, I thought that's that too.
I thought we approved it every year.
I don't remember approving it the last couple of years, but no. I don't
I think
remember
last
it.
year there was just a lot of discussion around it because of COVID and restrictions and trying
Right.
to figure out when and.
Right. So, thank you, that's all we needed. Are there any questions on that? So, the only thing that's missing from that information is is what Mr. Enright brought up when he arrived this morning. There doesn't seem to be in the calendar the date for when people who want to run, like, because the election is, what day is the election?
14th.
Is that on there?
That's the
Yeah.
orange.
Okay, so the election's the 14th, so anyone who would want to put in for an open seat would need to do so in a very specific amount of time, and that's not on this. So, and I know that that doesn't really apply to our calendar, but it would be helpful to know when that is, for some members.
Yeah.
The Hollis Town meeting is the 18th. It's on the calendar for Hollis. I thought they had already said it. I thought I saw it in writing somewhere.
I do have to say, last year, just for your information, and not that you need to do anything with this, 5 members of the Hollis Planning Board came to me at a meeting and were very upset because our meeting was on the same night as the planning board.
Right.
But we have to pick a date.
Wednesday nights.
I don't remember. I just know that there was a frustration because they were making a very big presentation
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
regarding something, and they,
Andy had to go to it.
I think did you have to go to a planning
Yes.
board meeting
Yeah.
during our, yeah, so there was something going on, and they were concerned and felt like their planning board meetings are set, like the second Wednesday of the month but there's a town meeting the third Wednesday of the month, and the first, there's a committee meeting every, so, not to disregard there, but I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
Another thing to consider, just to put out there, we will need to have either an early scheduled April board meeting or a delayed March board meeting for teacher renewals. So that'll be off our typical cycle.
Oh, because we should meet before the 14th, and the elections will
April.
be the 14th.
We
Okay.
usually do it
Before-
early April when,
So we'll have to change that date.
Yeah, I'm just
Okay.
putting
Oh,
it on
we don't have to
everyone's
do that
radar.
today.
because
Okay,
we're so
great.
going out in March.
Thank you.
We don't want to do anything in March.
So thank you. All right. Great. Thanks for that information. Next item on the agenda is potential increase to stipends for the HB co-op moderators. We have one moderator. He does not get a stipend now. If we were to consider giving a stipend, we would need to do that soon, correct? We would need to make a motion and make that decision, and then it would go into our budget, and it would be voted on in the March meeting, right? Am I right?
Well, the budget number would be put into the FY '24 budget.
Right.
If you so choose, I don't see anything that would prevent you from doing a stipend with the vote for the March of '23 meeting.
Out of
I
our
mean,
budget right
my-
now.
Oh, okay, it could come out of this, okay.
You could do it out of the operating budget. Just to give you an example, the board secretary gets a stipend of $400 for each meeting day, so if we have multiple days. Your stipends of board members are $450. The chair is $600, and the only other stipend we have is you have the district treasurer gets $1,000.
Do you know if moderators or any of the town moderators or any of the other school district moderators are stipend?
The same question has come up at Hollis. Right now, they are not. And
don't
I,
believe the town moderator in Brookline is.
I think Peter does it, isn't it?
Peter does
Yeah,
it.
I don't think he is either. It was just, it's something that came up, and then when we were researching it, we realized that you have the position of board secretary does get a stipend, but moderator does not. So I didn't know,
There's nothing that prevents us from, like, is it like a law that the moderator can't get a stipend?
no.
No.
Board secretary, are you talking about Dawn, or are you talking about?
Diane Levitt.
Oh, for the meeting.
Yes, for annual meeting, yes. So it's not something that we put down as a, deliberative item tonight. We just want you to get it out there. I'll bring it back again, and we can bring it to more of a deliberative item if that's the way the board would like to go.
I think we should consider it.
Tom, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I think we should consider it as well, and it's not only the meeting, but the moderator runs the election, and that's an all-day process. And it's a lot of work, and it's harder and harder to get people, not easier and easier.
Right.
I
So I
think-
think something like $1,000 or something in that neighborhood is appropriate.
What I'll do is, with the board's permission, I'll do a little research and see if other districts have what they pay theirs, or how that works. What we do, just so you know, if Drew wants to attend a conference from moderators or anything like that, we do pay for his professional development. But that's typically $40 or $60 for the year, to go to one of the trainings.
I do want to point out that our current moderator is our town moderator. He is the town moderator of Hollis, he's the Hollis School District moderator, and he's the co-op moderator. And the only reason he is one of either the town or the school is because he was written in. He didn't run for it.
That's the same in Brookline.
So these are not people, like,
Yeah.
no one wants to do it. And I'm not saying that $500 is going to convince someone to do it, but it's an unpaid, often thankless task. And so it's
One or
something.
2 days out of your life every year. I mean,
Well, and it
it's
could
a
be-
big deal.
And it could be more, because like last year, we had the Articles of Agreement meeting, so he did that, and like, kind of at our beck and call, at our whim, if you will. So it would be lovely to at least acknowledge that with a small stipend.
See, I thought that the purpose of stipends was to keep it from being a financial burden, to essentially to reimburse actual costs as opposed to provide compensation for labor. The reason I said, most people think they're volunteer positions, even if they think the board is a volunteer position. We get a stipend, and I think if you're trying to compensate, you're going to be
Okay.
getting a different kind of reaction from the community as far as what's expected. I'm not categorically opposed to it, but I think to defend it, I'd want to be able to point to costs associated. The rationale I heard for boards getting paid is stipend was perhaps to cover things like childcare or mileage reimbursement or costs of printing things and stuff like that. So
Candy.
How about the day out of your life?
Yeah, I mean,
no,
well,
no,
it is a
it's not,
day.
because that's the thing. You're volunteering. That's the concept of volunteering, is you're taking your time and donating it freely. So it was to actually reimburse out-of-pocket costs as opposed to reimburse you for your time. That's the perception I had.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I don't know if $500 is compensation at all, but I could argue that this would be reimbursement, because he comes to a number of our meetings. He plans so many things.
Okay, then that's fine.
I could justify it.
Go ahead, Tom. Go ahead.
Finish, please.
No, I could justify it either way, but
Yeah.
I feel strongly about
I
it.
don't call this compensation. I say it's getting harder and harder to find good people. And by the way, I want to make the argument that the school board should increase its stipend, so that, to make sure that it's not an issue, that you can get good people to, whether it's childcare or gas in your car or whatever it is. It's getting harder and harder to find the people that are at this table now, and to find a district moderator. And so giving them a small stipend, I don't think it's fair to say that it's compensation for time spent. It's still a volunteer. It's a huge responsibility. I watched Drew conduct the votes, the voting this year. He was there, I don't know, 12 hours?
That's
Busting
right.
his
Yeah.
butt, and probably was getting chewed out once or twice.
Yeah,
Well,
Tom,
and he
Tom, I
also-
agree with you, I'm just saying, I think it's a mistake if we try and justify it as compensation, that's my only point.
Right,
I
but
don't
he,
think
but
any of us have
let's,
said
Well, when you
Right.
said it's paying them
Did
for
I
a
say
day,
compensation?
yes.
Oh, it's a total mistake. I eat the word.
he also, it's not just Drew, it's any potential person who were to do this. So a potential person could need childcare. Drew doesn't need childcare, but another person could. A potential person may have to actually take a vacation day from work. So it's technically not like losing a day of pay, but they're taking a vacation day or 2 or 3 to do this. So there's all sorts of ways that, this could reflect back on that. So I feel like it's not compensation, it is a form of acknowledgement and reimbursement.
And I would like to expand the conversation to, I've never thought this, but I do now, to what this group gets. I think you should get more. Because I'm just worried about how this board keeps the level that it's at right now. It's gonna get harder, not easier.
Does feel like it's getting harder and harder to get folks to volunteer across, across multiple organizations that I'm involved in and that we all see. It's getting harder and harder for folks to step up. And there's lots of reasons for that. I'm not so sure stipends are going to help, but I don't know what can help. And I do think in this particular case with our moderator specifically, it would be good to bring it back to us for a deliberative item.
I will do that.
Great. Okay, the facilities update was, that's kind of on you too, Andy, sorry.
Yep. I just want to let you know that we are, by the end of the week, we'll have put in the new LED lighting in the gym and the mini gym.
And weight room.
We
And
were,
weight room.
and the weight room, thank you. We were able to, we actually had, Gina and myself, Kelly and Lance had I'll call it a lighting walk tonight, where we went from the middle school up through all our property to find out where we may need to put in some more outside lights.
Was it illuminating?
It was very, very.
Or not, so.
Yeah,
So you weren't in the dark,
Sometimes
or
they
maybe
will.
you were.
and we are in this budget looking at the parking lot that we gravelled last year. Right now is in the budget, as well as some other significant items for CIP. In terms of the overall projects, we met with our EEI, which is the company that did the ventilation for us today, and the architects, and next month I should have some, I'll say, solid estimates on costs. And again, we're looking at these costs for a variety of reasons. At some point, the board may decide to do a warrant article to see if we would like to move forward. It will also give us valuable information for our CIP plans if we choose not to do a warrant article. As the board is aware, we put in a wealth of time to submit proposals for state building aid. There were 17 proposals put in. Our 4 proposals came in 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th.
So we were on the bottom.
We are on the bottom. And we have been guaranteed to have that position next year, meaning that nobody who applies next year will move in front of us unless their need is greater.
Wait a second.
Yeah, yes, I know. I was going to emphasize that. And how would their need be greater? If under the point system, they had significant for free and reduced lunch, they might jump over us. They could also jump over us potentially if they were, their building had safety concerns. So,
Risk of losing accreditation and things like that.
yes.
So we may stay at 14, 15,
We
16, and
may.
17.
So, did you say how many got, how far down the list they thought were gonna actually get money
Well,
this year?
I don't know because one of the first projects is a new school.
Where?
Well, there's,
Is it Concord?
well, Concord needs one, Derry is put in for one, Rochester is put in for one. So there are a bunch of them. So I don't know if the state, and this is just me, if the $50 million that they're looking to allocate is really going to be a monumental shift in what gets done, because we've already got a pool of that money allocated for projects that had to happen in the state. So when they say there's 50 million, it's minus what's already been allocated. And then if a large project is awarded, I think it'll be one project.
It'll wipe it out.
It'll wipe it out, yeah. But
So we'll go up to number 13, 14, 15,
Correct.
16.
Yeah, but as I said, I think that the value really was that we were able to take a critical look at our facilities. Because what Kelly's been able to do during her time and through her leadership and working with the leadership team is really put us on very progressive CIP plans. So like, it's, 5 years ago, it sounded ludicrous, but we're doing Phase 4, Section 8 of the roof. You know, it was almost a $3 million project 5 years ago, and this is one of the last phases we need to do. And the nice part is, then you're not going to have a section of the roof or the entire roof go again at the same time because you sectioned it off. We've done a significant portion of the ventilation, which would occur in December. But there's probably still, from my guesstimate today, about $7 million worth of infrastructure at both buildings, when you start to talk about boilers and LED lights in those pieces. We have middle school science labs that haven't been touched probably since the middle school was built. We have a high school cafeteria that doesn't really, isn't large enough to meet the needs of the students. So we'll have more, what I said, concrete estimates next month. And then once we have those, we can form what I'll call a plan of attack. But one of the things that we will be talking about later is, we're also trying to make a difference with our hourly wage earners, and it's the balancing of that expense versus other needs. And the taxpayers have always supported us, and I've always thanked them for that, but we need to be conscious of the needs across the SAU and the needs for the people, because they're the single biggest factor that change things. So that's where we are with facilities, but if you do get an opportunity, seeing the new gym lights and the mini gym lights, it's night and day, and they're much more efficient. And we are working on a way to be able to track that efficiency so that we could take those two rooms, kind of show the old cost versus the new cost, and then move that to what it might look like for the building committee, as we heard from the energy committee tonight. Plus, Tim was over at multiple athletic events because our high school did so well this year, but a bunch of them were over at Exeter. And Exeter has probably one of the largest solar fields, and they are heating, they are using that for their electrical costs. And it's something that we will be examining because we've had some very good results. I'd say we probably generate 85%, somewhere around there, for our electric bills at the primary and upper through the solar. Down the road, you're probably going to see electric buses because they're already being piloted in New Hampshire. And if we could produce our own source of that energy and charge those buses, all of a sudden you can start to really change that cost curve on electric. So there are a bunch of things going on. Kelly will be updating the Budget Committee on Monday night. And we still don't know yet, until we have more of a final budget number, whether we'd be making any recommendation on a bond or a lease to do some work this year.
Is there any place to have the House Energy Committee get involved and after the public input? Maybe, do we want to add them to the agenda in the future? Is there a time to do that? Is there further conversation that needs to happen? More research on that?
Well, just so you know, they're already involved with us. They have measurement gauges on a number of our electric panels to kind of watch the flow and ebb and flow, and it was a technique we used at the primary and the upper school. And the first thing it did was, it's funny, we have a lot of power failures in our towns, and a lot of times they're quick, they're 15, 20 minutes, but what we forget to realize, sometimes it sets off kilter all our machinery, and when it kicks on and when it kicks off. And one of the big things that we face is surge charges during peak times. So if the hot water heater is now coming on in the middle of the day instead of at 2 a.m. when it's supposed to because of all the different things, we hit a surge. And those surge very expensive. So we've been able to reduce those. One of the things, one of our neighboring districts with their lights for the field, they were hitting a surge when they turned their lights on, which as you grow in electric, that can happen. So they actually put in a generator to start their lights every time, and they don't have the surge. So we have an amazing energy committee in the town, absolutely amazing. So Mike sits with me on the Hollis building projects as a representative from the Hollis Budget Committee. So I will follow up with him, and we'll do some, I'll say, some work, and then we'll come back to the board with, as Mike would say, some, I think we would call it like low-hanging fruit, changes that we can make that won't be that expensive to start us down this path. But I think, solar is something that, yes, it'll be an expensive outlay, but it will pay for itself in a relatively short period of time.
Can we get government credits that are available now for solar?
We did when we were in Hollis. Every time you go out, it depends on where they are at. We get some great rebates in Hollis.
I thought we were in a good place now with all of the stuff we just did.
Hollis is the
Big
co-op,
guys.
the co-op isn't.
Yeah.
Hollis is, but the.
No, I mean in terms of getting government money, I thought there was an endless supply.
Yes.
As long as you
It's all
buy
flowing our way
American.
too.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. Does anybody have any questions on that? Before we move on? FY '24 budget?
Yeah, I just, as much as I touched upon it, I do want to, because I have the updated version, so I just wanted to give you an idea of where we're at, so when you hear it on Monday night, if you listen to the Budget Committee,
I'm going to try.
it'll be slightly different. But right now, we are proposing, after round three, an operating budget of $26,526,912. That will allow us to most likely make guidance. But there's some discussions that have to go on with the Budget Committee for that, which means from year to year, there will be an increase of $924,416.76, or as of today, a 3.61% increase. If all the warrants passed, and just so you know what warrants we'd be talking about the HESA contract, the additional HESA money that we'll talk about later tonight, either a new contingency fund, all right, at 125,000, or an increase to the percent, I don't know which one. And then maintenance trust we're proposing to increase that from the 200,000 to 300,000, just because maintenance costs continue to go up for our normal day-to-day. And then our special ed trust fund, the annual contribution of 25,000.
And we're going to continue to do that even though we have maxed, haven't we got to 250?
Yes, we've hit the mark, but there are discussions with the Budget Committee, because over the last 3 or 4 years, out-of-district special ed costs have increased about 5% per year. So the number we had done is kind of getting old, and right now, our total fund could be 50% of an expensive out-of-district placement. So if all those warrants passed, and the board proposed all those, because we don't even know what we're proposing yet, we would have an overall increase of 5.14%. That will come down more because there are some things that we are still discussing. Also, retirement. We have our first 2. If it stays at 2, that will be fewer retirements than last year. But all of a sudden, if that grows to 3 more, that number could go up. So there's some volatility still, but to be in November, to be hovering around guidance, we're very excited about that. And we want to, once again, extend our gratitude and thanks to the Budget Committee, because we've had some great discussions, and they really are looking out for not only Hollis Brookline today, but Hollis Brookline 5 and 10 years from now, which is excellent.
Great, thank you. Any questions on that? Okay, would it be okay if we took a 5-minute recess for the chair? Thank you. So,
We only have 1 minute, though.
okay. It's 7:59, we're
Yep.
supposed to deliberate at 8,
We'll
but.
make it up.
Okay, thank you.
Not a problem.
recess at 8:03 PM, and Principal Patrick West has been dismissed, but Mr. Grisone is sticking with us. Has been dismissed, not dismissed. Has been asked, has been sent home. He's allowed to go home.
No detention?
Tim's the one with detention.
These,
Yes,
I swear, like, all you people so specific, okay? He is leaving the building. He's left the building.
Mic drop.
All right, moving on.
Moving on.
Elvis.
We need to see what action the board will take to approve the anti-discrimination plan as presented. It is in your board packet. It has been this is our second time looking at it, or third, or something like
Second,
that?
yep.
Second, right. So, if there are, and we asked questions last month and covered them, so, and I assume any changes, did we make any changes?
There is a change, so after there's a motion, I
Oh,
can
okay.
address them.
Okay, so I need a motion to approve the anti-discrimination plan as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Krista, seconded by Kate.
Okay, so the only change is on page 2 of the document. We updated the summary of parent guardian rights only to include the most recent laws. So there was really not much of a change at all, but item number 1 changed, and then the sentence above it. That's it.
Page 2.
Page,
Can't even find it in the packet.
it is
It's
after,
It's before all of the policies. Are you in policy?
Yeah.
It's right after the budget,
and before the program of studies.
before the program of studies. There you go. You had it right there.
Looks like page 70. 69, 70.
That would have been helpful. I could have looked at that.
What changed?
So if you look on,
Which page?
it
Page
says
2.
page 2 of the plan, summary of parent guardian rights. So that first sentence was updated to include the most recent law. And also item number 1 was just updated to match the current regulation. So,
Did you find it?
Yeah.
You did? Okay. All right.
I thought that was part of the program of study. Just a cover of very
Yeah,
similar.
yeah. So, all those in favor? 6-0.
thank you.
Is this a second reading or is this approval?
That was
This is
approval.
approval.
Okay. I need a motion to approve the Hollis Brookline High School Program of Studies as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Krista,
Second.
second by Kate. And is there any, you made the changes that you said last time? Any discussion on this?
Yep.
Go ahead.
How is this published? Is it only electronic or do you make hard copy?
Hard copies would only be
Okay.
internal office. It's produced.
So is it just put online and then people come and get it? When is it needed?
Most importantly for the students during the course selection process.
When does that kick off?
The start of the year,
What did you say?
the start of this, like January.
Yeah, the new year. So we talked about the course recommendation time period after midterms. That's at the end of the second quarter. So January, Martin Luther King week, somewhere around there is when the recommendations come out. That's when students start identifying
We approve it
coursework.
Tonight, does that lock it? Or will you still edit it?
Are you specifically referring to the updates from CTE centers?
That I am specifically talking about, but other areas as well, potentially.
I think if there are edits that don't change the meaning, I mean, if we get a new description from Milford on a particular course, I don't see that edit needing to come back to the board because we don't control that language anyways.
But will you actually change it is the question, or do you just figure it's done and live with the discrepancy?
It all depends on when they send it to us.
Yeah, if there were, it's not to say that if a course were made available in Milford that wasn't in our program of studies, that a student would necessarily be able
Is
to
it a
take
living
it.
document, or is it,
For the most part, it is not a living document. However, if information comes to us that's beyond our control in terms of the timing of it, we will make sure that our students have that updated information about courses.
because as I notified you, there are some known discrepancies already, and the response that Amanda sent back said that most of the programs don't distribute their updated information till at least December, at earliest December. So it's quite probable that there will be new information that may change the offerings and/or the scheduling of classes in those CTE programs. That's number one. Number two is the discussion that we had earlier tonight about possibly altering some approach which might, for some reason, make you want to change it. If it's an online item and we approve it at this point in time, I would hope that changes that doesn't preclude updates of things that change, and/or the possibility of real-time revisions if something better is decided. Because the whole reason why we always used to have to deal so heavily
It's 'cause
with
it had to
this
be printed.
schedule was the print schedule, and we're no longer constrained by that, from what I'm hearing.
True, but there's also the budget process, and that includes materials for courses. So I think all of our internal systems are, for the most part, set once this is approved, for the most part.
Isn't that a function of enrollment, which you won't know until later, as far as how much you need to buy?
If we're proposing a new course
I'm not talking
that
about
runs, then we would have budgeted for the materials for that to move forward. So yes, if we always have one section of AP US History, and then there are 44 students that want to take it, and we're going to have a second section, then we'll have to try to find the money, because that was unbudgeted and that was based on student enrollment. But some other courses that we're trying to build in, we start that conversation in the summer, we put it into the budget, we look at all of those pieces. But in terms of when we get information from Nashua, from Alvern, from Milford, and from what I gather, there are potentially some significant changes to those offerings. We're going to have to share that to make sure that students are interested in courses that are actually available. And if there's a new offering, that we're making that known, but we can't provide that until it's given to us. But we're less bound by those because there's a whole application process, and we won't know how many of our students, if any, will be accepted into the program until much later on in the process. So the students select those and select alternatives, and then we run schedules, not necessarily sure that they're going to get into a program, and if it's morning or afternoon. So
Can I ask a couple questions? One, in the future, could we potentially create a program, an internal program of studies and a separate program of studies for CTE? Two separate documents, in essence? Because then we'd have more flexibility in the CTE, because it's really not our programming. That could be a solution.
With soft copy, you don't need to do that.
Or could we change this motion so that it's not as presented, but with some language that indicates that there is potential for edits as long as the spirit of the document stays the same?
I just would like to comment that we're talking 5% of our kids. Okay, I mean, where the changes that you sent us, Tom, might be coming from in Milford, we have 7 total students that go to Milford. So, I mean, the program of studies is designed for the the vast majority of our students, and though I love CTE courses and would love to see more kids do it, I just caution that we're talking about delaying something for 43 out of 800 and some odd students.
I'm not asking you to delay it. What I'm saying is, there are known incorrect elements already, and there are likely to be more, and I would like a commitment that as that information becomes available, that we correct this document, and that our approval does not become the reason why you don't update it when you have new information.
I have no problem updating with new information, but we are dependent then on a different school board in a different town approving that, because what may be happening, I assume, still has to go to their school board for their approval. And I can tell you that we battle this difficulty with our neighbors in Nashua quite frequently for accuracy.
I don't see the point, because all I'm saying is, if you've got something out there that the kids are using as a reference to pick classes, and you are informed that the information is not accurate, that you update the document. It's online. If something is saying it's a semester course and it's a year-long course, you change that when you find that information. To leave it for any reason incorrectly does nobody any good.
And I don't disagree with you, but it's kind of disappointing to have to get that information from a sitting Hollis Brookline School Board member and not from the school that would be sending our children to.
I agree, and I'm disappointed that we don't have the connections between our school and their school to have that open channel of communication. And I don't know whose fault that is, or if it's anyone's fault, or just a byproduct of the system, but the information that Amanda sent suggested that the school does get notification when the program of studies in those schools come out, but that they don't come out until later in the year. So we've got two options. We can approve it tonight. Well, we've got multiple options, but we can approve it tonight with the understanding that there may be updates coming that we should incorporate as we become aware, or we wait until later in the year to approve it, because it sounds like the need for it to be used doesn't happen before the first of the year.
I have no problem passing it, and we will do whatever updates are required. But I would say that this schedule for the program of studies was accelerated by our own board, and now we have conversations in July to start the process.
Right, we were trying to move it earlier so that
Correct.
we could,
We were trying to accelerate the start of it. I didn't hear people saying we were trying to accelerate the closure of it.
Can I just add, I think it makes sense to approve with the caveat that as information comes to us from other districts, we will update it accordingly, because that's kind of beyond our control. It's what we're going to be able to provide, and we will get that at various times. I am not confident we'll get that update from all of our sending schools by our December meeting. So I don't think that delaying 1 month for all of our courses makes most sense. I think just being able to have that flexibility to amend that living document.
to make it more of a living document. I think what Tom would like is, since it is completely an online document, to make it more of a living document, but with some, like, by January, when course selection starts, it's going to, the updating is going to have to settle down. Like, I mean, if the updates, if the districts haven't gotten the information to us by the time kids are choosing courses, if that information is coming, I assume what's happening is kids who've already selected courses are being told by guidance counselors that's going to change and it's going to be different. So I think we can change the motion to have it updated accordingly, with the understanding that at a certain time.
Or just have people in this room acknowledge that the fact that we approved it tonight does not block them from making corrections.
Well, that's fine with me. I think corrections are corrections,
Yeah, I did,
right?
I'm not looking to upset the apple cart. My first question, this used to be a print document, and we had to go to print, and once it's committed to print,
Then it's committed to print.
then it doesn't matter what we learn, you're not gonna have people go in and handwrite them. The fact that it is now almost exclusively used as a soft copy, as an online version, left it open, so that was why I just wanted to ask, will we continue to make corrections as appropriate, even if we approve it tonight? Because sometimes we've gotten feedback at the meeting, and we didn't want to make changes because it was already approved, and they didn't want to reopen and start the process over again.
Did you have something to say, Krista?
I made the motion, I can.
I don't think it has to change.
Okay. Okay. So you just want to make sure, are members of the board okay with updates being made over the course of the year?
Can I ask how that process happens? Do we reach out to them, or do they reach out to us? I have no idea.
The receiving schools, I would say a combination of both, the receiving, and if there's updates that we don't know about, I suppose we wouldn't know, it would be on us to then reach out. But
Okay.
if there's any updates that they make us aware of, those are conversations that would happen in a counseling office. The student's interested in taking, a welding class that's offered it shows in our handbook that it's a 0.5 credit, but it's actually a 1.0 credit. It's not that they're not eligible to take that class now. It would just be in a conversation or a meeting with a counselor who might have the information.
If it goes from 0.5 to a 1.0, it probably means they've got to commit to go in 2 semesters, so.
Yeah, or something.
It's going to change their schedules.
Okay. I'm just asking, so we want it to be ready by the end of January, so the kids can start, correct? That's when they
Yep.
start. So I just didn't know if we had a system, we'd contact the schools and say, hey, any updates to these classes? This is what we have. Do you guys have it, or do they contact us?
Yeah, and I think that, like Tom said, kind of the rigidity of the document, it's not like we're making those calls to then make changes to a program of studies. When the program has
Right.
been approved in the past, there's really not changes to it. It's more for information that then the counselor would have to work with students who are interested in taking CTE courses.
Right, just to have the most updated information.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we just make sure that we proactively reach out, copy what
Yep.
we have for all of our offerings in each
Yep.
of our schools, reach out, and then ask them where they are in the process, if they have any changes to what we have, and then if they're not ready, when they expect their courses to go to the board, so we can check back in, like, we thought it was going to be the second week of January. Do you have final language for us?
So we can add that part of the
That makes
process.
sense.
Great. All right, so we're not going to change the motion. Sounds like everybody's on the same page. Sounds cool to me. So all in favor? 6-0. Great. Thanks. To see what action the board will take regarding youth risk behavior surveys, we can put the motion on the floor, and then we can talk about it. I need a motion to participate in the youth risk behavior survey. Moved by Tom,
Second.
second by Krista. Are you leading this discussion?
Sure.
Great.
Tim and I had a conversation, and it's been a number of years since we brought this topic to the board. It actually was voted on prior to my arrival, so it's coming up on quite a few years. And over the last couple of years, there's been some questions, input, and we wanted to bring it to the board. We believe that we do get very good data out of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. We do know that we want to start transitioning to do more of a, I'm going to call it summer retreat program with our students, kind of going along with that whole advisory piece, and give them more ownership of this, because we think that may assist us in addressing some of these challenging behaviors. So in talking with the chair, my recommendation at this point would be kind of to start a combination of the two. I would recommend that we continue with the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. We'll post it online, we'll do that. Then when the data comes back, Tim will utilize that data to kind of lead a discussion with our students to kind of start to guide them of what the trends are and things of that nature, and see how that process goes. And then we may transition away from the survey. We may incorporate the survey in the model I'm talking about. We did have some concerns regarding some of the questions, and if you've read some of the questions, it is what it is. There are some questions I personally don't like. I know there's some questions that Tim doesn't like, but at the same time, I think the data and the way I saw it used in the past has helped us to curb things like, and I'll give you some simple examples, data around seatbelt use. And, we were able to work with our SRO a number of years back and really change the whole mindset around that. We had seen some spikes around, just distracted driving. So we had a Red Ribbon Week, there was a car on the front lawn, and during prom season, we do a number of different activities with kids to kind of alert them to distracted driving and texting and driving and drinking and driving and all of those things. So it's just, when the data comes back, it's an overwhelming amount of data because of all the questions, but Tim and Rick before him and I have always worked to kind of narrow that focus, and I think that's kind of how I see this working. We would narrow the focus as the adults, bring that narrowed focus to our leadership groups of students, and start to work on plans with them of how we move forward, and then come back, because this is every other year, Tim, correct?
Yeah.
So we would do it this year, have 2 years' worth of data, and then revisit the issue again to see if we can move more towards just the student leadership model, which exists in some other districts that Tim and I are aware of and has been successful. So that's my recommendation on this, and it's just more, we are obligated to let the Youth Risk Behavior Survey know if we're participating. If we do that, we'll post it online, and we will continue with the paper and pencil copies rather than the online format. And between Tim and I, we can try to answer any questions you may have.
I'm assuming the students are given a preface to the whole thing and why we do it, and
Yeah, there's a script that you're required to present and read to the students prior to administrating.
And teachers read that script to
Yep.
like a small classroom, a
Yep.
classroom full of students.
Yep.
And just, if you can recall, in that script, is there like a comment to, let students know that their counselors are available, if anything, in the survey? That was my only concern with the survey. I'm not really concerned about the questions, but I do think that some kids who've had certain experiences might need to talk to somebody after taking the survey.
I can't speak specifically if it has that comment about counselor availability. I do know part of the statement is about the opt-out and how at any point in time you can opt out, either to begin or at any point in the survey you
Just
don't.
kids can just say, I don't want to do this, and they can turn it over and be done.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Do you have any idea percentage-wise how many of our students usually complete the survey in any given year?
It's been a while.
It's offered to all 9 through 12. The number of,
Is it the majority?
I would say it's the majority, yeah.
Yeah.
The concern I had is there are some questions there that I think might be trigger points for parents.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if the inclusion of the entire set diminished the participation because of parents not wanting their kids to participate. You know what I mean? One of the things, I think it was you who said when this topic was introduced, I think it was last month, it was coming forward, was that there was concern that it wasn't necessarily a great fit for our district. That the questions or the kind of topics that might be most valuable aren't necessarily what's emphasized in the survey. I think that was kind of.
I would agree with that statement. I don't know if I made it.
And I'm just wondering if we did not participate, how prepared are we to do anything as an alternative?
I think we are moving down a very positive path with an alternative. I think one of the pieces is we didn't participate in the last survey, even though we took it, we didn't send that in. So we've gone a number of years without data. I think if you get this data, it is something that you can really focus in on. I've actually looked at the questions, question by questions in the data, and I agree with Tom, some of the questions bother me, but I think when we look at areas that have helped our students, I think it's been very positive. And I think this will give us an opportunity to transition, because this would be Tim's first data under the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And that's why I'm proposing kind of this model and then reflecting on it again in 2 years, because we may know at that time we no longer feel the need for that data. There might be another place to get that data, or there might be something else that we could opt into, again, using the same protocols of getting the information out and that, and letting parents be aware. But this is kind of the state-approved piece, and I don't disagree that some of the questions maybe aren't as specific to our district as other districts. I think there are many questions that we can, and I think that's where I come back to the adults, like Rick used to do. He would come back to the board, and he would identify areas of concern for him and tell us what he was going to be focusing on. And I think that's the way I see this being used, but I totally support Tim's philosophy of then taking it from the adults and bringing it back to our wonderful leadership organizations in our schools. And it could be different groups selecting different topics to cover, or it could be the data of how we designed Red Ribbon Week, Spirit Week, whatever it may be, what we do before proms or things like that. So I think I have complete faith in Tim and how the data will be used, and I support his proposal of transitioning to this leadership team. I just think that no data for a number of years is going to make that task very difficult, whereas if we have a piece of data that will be cultivated, not only like the senior leadership, but the kids who are in those groups who are coming up through the ranks, so they'll understand the purpose of why we do this.
Someone had also mentioned the potential concern that because of our small population and somewhat lack of anonymity within it, that it was difficult in some areas to maintain anonymity in the responses as well. Is that a concern?
I think that's always a concern. I think we're very sensitive as groups now to about any type of data gathering, whether it's us as adults or kids. And I think when you know my grade, know my height, there's not going to be that many of me in a particular grade. So that's the reality. But that data is what Tim and I get, and that's where I feel the safety net is there, because we're not looking at anybody by that, their demographics. We're only looking at, this is the question, this is how kids answered the question. Is it a concern that we want to address as a school? So that fashion from what Rick did won't change. But I think that's where Tim and I shared some concerns on some of the demographic questions. When you're not the largest school, it does narrow it down.
So the recommendation is to continue with it for this year and maybe try to use it as a tool and then potentially transition to another method of gathering this kind of information
Right.
and figuring that out.
Correct. I think this year, the reason why I'd like to continue doing it is because we don't have any pandemic data. I mean, we're hearing things,
good
but this
point.
will be our own kids telling us around, social, emotional, mental health, suicide risk, all of those things. So I think that gives Tim and I kind of the categories we're looking at, to kind of sit down, go through the data, and then formulate kind of what I'll call our plan of attack.
I can just say, I always found it very helpful when Rick would bring it to us. And I felt like we learned a lot more. And I also know that, like, for example, I'm sure this is a controversial topic, but vaping, like, you know, we knew we were changing policies to include e-cigarettes and, you know, those kinds of things, but it was through the Youth Risk Behavior Survey and anecdotal situations that we really, you know, have learned a lot about the struggles our kids are having with that particular topic. And so I feel like it's important for us to be on top of that. So I support us continuing to do it. I looked at the tool too. It's a survey tool. None of them are always 100% great. So I would support us doing it for another year. But I do love the idea of us figuring out a more personalized way to get that information.
Is the state data available to districts that did not participate?
I think it is. I'll look into it.
Yeah.
So are there any other comments on this? Okay, at this point, we'll take a vote. All those in favor? 6-0. Okay, so are we putting the next one up in a motion first, right? So to see what action the motion will take regarding the tentative agreement with HESA.
Just for procedure, are we supposed to be viewing this in public before it comes to a vote?
I can't hear you.
I just wasn't sure if we were,
I'm not sure. It's been ratified, but to your point, I don't know if we have to
We-
look at
we-
it non-public
We
first.
typically, when we've reached an
TA.
agreement,
okay,
Krista has presented in the past in the same fashion.
okay, it's been many years, so I don't
Yep.
recall.
So I need what is the motion? The motion to, I have motion by member to approve the tentative agreement with the Hollis Educational Support Staff Association, right? So I need a motion.
So
Needs-
moved.
Moved by Kate. Second,
Second.
Cindy, whoever's over there.
Where do we decide we start on?
Approve, motion to approve the tentative agreement, okay.
That is the title.
Okay,
Like, why is it just-
HESA team, I need your help if I missed something. Okay, as we were given circumstances where we were really struggling to hire people this year, in food service as well as in other areas. And so what was happening is we were hiring people in higher steps than they normally would be hired in our school district. And it then was causing problems with people that we already had hired, who were frustrated that people who just got hired were making more money than them, which would be a normal reaction from anyone. But the important part is that we really are struggling to hire, and we've been struggling to hire our support staff for many years, and we keep giving little teeny increments and trying to put a Band-Aid on the situation, but it's not working. And certainly in today's economy, it's not working at all. So we opened up the contract to discuss salary with HESA so that we could try to find a solution to this that would move us forward as a district. It's happening all over the country. People are getting significant pay increases. People are getting bonuses to sign-on bonuses, many things in order to get employees, to keep employees, and to staff their businesses and municipalities. And so we worked with our business manager and with Kelly and with Gina to come up with what we thought would help us to not only hire, but to retain our staff. And previously, our starting salary was $12.34. This year, coming up, was going to be $12.34 an hour. And we just found that was not going to work. That just, we're not going to be able to hire people. We're going to have to continue hiring them at higher steps. We're going to continue having angry employees. We're going to have people leaving. And it just doesn't make for a solid organization. So we changed the salary grids for both FY '24. We went to a 2-year contract. We changed the salary grids. We got rid of the base salary.
Can
We,
just confirm, FY '24, is that 23, 24, 24, 25?
23, 24.
23, 24. So we are doing a 2-year contract. And you'll see that I don't have the other salary grid to show you, but we have increased to a $15 per hour as a minimum wage that we hire at, which is what many of the retail locations and other places are hiring, as well as our comparative school districts. And when we look at HESA, we look at comparative school districts as the locations near us, because that is where our staff is coming to. They're coming from locations near us. They're not traveling to Oyster River or to Bow or to Concord to work. So we look more at the locations right around us. So basically, what that comes down to, we restructured the grid. Base steps removed, step 9 has been added. The following Cat 1 positions, food service and library assistant, have moved to Cat 2. We've shifted Cat 2
Could you just repeat that, what the first one change was?
I'm sorry, pardon me?
Can you repeat what the first change was?
It's on the back of the thing. The Cat 1 position, food service and library assistant, have moved to Cat 2. We've shifted the food service in Cat 2 to Cat 3, and the food service from Cat 3 to Cat 4. We kept the health insurance caps that we were already going to have on for this year. For FY '24. And then in FY '25, we are not increasing the health insurance caps. What we did say, though, is that if the GMR in '24 to '25 exceeds 10%, that we can open the contract and have a discussion. No promises of doing anything, just a discussion. This contract is a 2-year contract. It is not standardized. It has been ratified and by HESA, and the steps I'm showing you, that little box, are showing the people that were hired above where they would normally have been hired and where they will be in the FY '24. And no one will be going down in how much they're making. Am I hitting all the high spots, guys?
I just want to clarify that the contract that we have in place was for FY '22, '23, and '24. So this was revisiting '24 and then tacking on 1 additional year without touching anything but the grid.
Adds a year to the.
Adds 1 year to the contract, but
Right.
it amends FY '24 as
thank you.
well.
Thank you for clarifying.
Where are the caps in the current contract?
They're
The
right
caps
next to
are
the,
in the health insurance,
Yeah, I'm looking at them, just not seeing.
and
Is that the
they're right
up
in
to?
that paragraph. It'll say it in the entire paragraph.
it's a dollar amount.
So the current cap is 1285.
And so none of that has changed. So when you see the dollar amount of the 18,000, that includes what would have been in the warrant article for FY '24 regardless, because it was part of that negotiated agreement.
Okay.
So really, we
where would
just
the
looked at,
caps have been without the,
without this new,
yeah,
exactly the same. We were gonna have a warrant article that included $18,000 worth of health insurance caps and a salary amount. The only thing that's different is that this tentative agreement includes a larger salary amount because we've completed additional shifts of categories and redid the,
Do you know where the
Table.
cap is right now?
I don't know, it's in the agreement.
But I mean, is it this value that's in the contract?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
So-
nothing about the health insurance has changed from the printed copy of the contract.
So but right now, it's. I was just,
I believe it's increasing $25 for single, $50 for two-person, and $25 for family.
so what's the 18,000 related to?
That's the
That's
increase.
those.
Oh, that's the, okay. I thought you were increasing the cap to 18.
No, 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 no,
That's the
no, no.
cost of the,
That's
Right.
the cost of
I'm
the
sorry.
increase in the cap.
I'm sorry.
No, so that's the cost of
I
the
understand.
additional. And then we are not changing the insurance for the second year.
Just out of curiosity, on the small table about moving, I'm wondering what's the scenario that has some positions moving and others on the same step not moving?
Sure.
So the category they're in?
So, we wanted, an attempt was made to kind of write what we had done, which was hire people, the language allowed us to do so, but hire people at a higher step so that they'd actually accept the position. We wanted to write that by doing that one-time readjustment, go back to where you are. However, we wanted to ensure that nobody lost money in the process. So, current step 7 down to next year, step 5, is whether they belong on step 5 or the lowest they could go with while still getting an increase. Some others, based on the position and whether it switched a category only or just a step, it didn't always work out.
The first line might be a different category position than the second. There's no
Correct.
equivalency.
These are individuals.
Those
that
are individuals that are-
Individuals that we
I
have blocked
understand that. I
out.
just-
Those are the people that we
Yeah.
wanted to make sure got
Yep.
acknowledged in the contract, in the changes. And then, as you can see, off-step, the first year is increasing by 8% because that is the approximate percentage of increases on the step. And we wanted to make sure that off-step was given that same increase, as well as making sure that they were not making less money than people on step. And then the second year, it's 3.5%. On step, 3.5% off step.
So the second year is more in keeping with what we've traditionally done. So it's really this year that is a significant change and is obviously, I mean, it's clearly a
This
big
year
jump
would have
in
been
money.
$86,000.
We would have been asking for $86,000 at the town meeting and the 18,000.
No, the 86 included.
86.
The 86 included the 18, okay.
So,
So we would have been asking for 86 total in the warrant, okay. And now we'll be asking for
162.
2. Thank you for doing that math. It's really hard for me. So, yeah, so 160, oh, it's right there, 16206. So, yeah, we're asking for a lot more money.
We are asking for a lot more money. The other thing we did,
Or not. I just want to make clear, we're talking comparative to our budget. This is not a lot of money.
Okay, you're
no,
right.
I will
You're
agree.
right.
It's
You're
not a
right.
lot of money. And it is, we really
I
are
misspoke.
writing
I wanted-
where we need, we're putting these employees where they need to be. This is where they need
Absolutely.
to be paid. And we also were able to, and when I say we, I mean Kelly, able to take the salary grid and make it more consistent. And so now the increases are more consistent. And we are focusing, we focused a lot on the categories 2 and 3, where that's where the majority of our employees are.
Yeah.
And it's also where we need to hire
I
people.
didn't mean to sound so harsh, but
No, you're right.
when we look at a $28 million budget, and the amount of money you're talking here for people who are the backbone and fundamentally keep the doors open, keep our kids safe, and when we talk about one trusted adult, a lot of our kids have amazing relationships with these people. This is very small money, very small.
I agree.
It's exactly the way we feel.
100%. So, with that being said, first of all, thank you to the team, who I think have done a great job in getting this all presented to us beautifully, and I hope we can approve it. So I think we can take a vote. Ready? All those in favor? 6-0. Great job,
thank you,
great
Jean.
job, thank you all. All right, so moving to policy. Tim, I'm sure you're anxious to get home, but
All good.
I feel like policy, some of this.
Loves this work.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, I'm still in the program.
All good.
Okay, so
We'll be driving home in the dark 5 hours ago.
That's right.
policy, yeah, that's
Very
right.
true.
Because the dark is at 3 o'clock now, so.
We're always in the dark.
So policy, sorry, I should not. So I need a motion to accept the first reading of policy GEA, extracurricular and co-curricular advisors and athletic coaches as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Cindy,
Second.
second by Krista. I was not at the policy meeting, so I'm gonna have to have someone else.
I can speak to it.
Thank you.
This policy was brought to committee just to review, we had looked at it in 5 years, so it was about time to review it and make sure policy matched our procedures. And so we had to think about the intent here, and I recall the first time we passed this policy, thinking about the big shift was that our advisors and our coaches had 1-year positions, and every year, there was no guarantee from year to year. So that still stands, but then what we did was we switched some of the language so that the building administrator makes recommendations to the superintendent to hire coaches and advisors rather than all of these appointments going to the board. Oftentimes, we're hiring coaches the day before the season starts, and it doesn't allow us to run our operation for coaches and advisors to go to the board. In addition, our support staff members are not hired by the board. We don't make recommendations to hire our support staff. So then that placed a different level. It just seemed odd that coaches and advisors were brought before the board, but not support staff. So what we did add is the board will be provided with a list of updated appointments and reappointments as necessary for coaches and advisors. So you will have information about them, but you will not be approving them. Is a change.
Any questions on that? Okay, so.
Yes. I waited to see if anybody else had a chance.
Did you see how close I was? I was catching all the
What do you have, Tom?
We are such a show, I have to tell you.
Is,
Oh yeah, everyone's tuning in.
Our middle school, coaches require, governed by NHIAA?
Tri-county.
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 Yeah.
Similar organization,
Do
right,
they-
but for just middle school.
But do they have the same requirements? I guess the question is, because it says that their
Yeah, I should probably
eligibility
add
will
that.
all be by the NHIAA, and I'm wondering if that,
It's my understanding that Brian holds them to that same eligibility criteria. NHIA
does
has
that
a,
ensure that they're matching the tri-county state?
Yes,
limit?
if they're doing the NHIA, they're doing the tri-county.
it's a higher standard.
Yep.
The line where you had, board will be provided with a list of updated appointments and reappointments as necessary. I recommend deleting as necessary because it is not necessary, but if you want to do it, just say that you'll do it. Do you follow me?
And I think what we were struggling with, I'll just give you a little background, is we have multiple seasons of athletics, so it didn't make sense to, here's our list of coaches for the year. We don't have our list of coaches for the year in September, but we do have our list of advisors for the year. So did it make sense to provide the list of advisors in the beginning of the year and then the coaches by season, sort of what we already see in Brian's report? Or to your point, if you don't feel that that's necessary, that's also fine too. But because we did switch it from approved by the school board to approved by the superintendent, we wanted there to be some transparency with
I'll
those
tell you,
positions.
there is no necessity, so if
Okay.
you're only gonna do it when necessary, then you're not gonna do it.
Okay.
So basically, if you take as necessary out, you'd still have to do it. You have to provide us, but it doesn't have to happen at a specific time. There's no time for, it's
Just
just,
no as
it's
necessary.
just, right.
You will
It
provide
struck
us
me,
with.
I thought that was a holdover or something, and,
Okay, so we'll take that out. Or, policy committee will decide.
are the tables that you plan to use the same tables that were shown in June, I think?
The stipend tables that were showed
Yeah.
a few times, yeah.
Okay. I will say now, I'm going to be voting against this because of the stipend tables. I'm uncomfortable right now with the idea of people simply getting increases because of time and position. Where we're going to be reviewing it every year, at least every year by this, I think there's plenty of opportunity to make changes to the recommended salaries for positions as they are needed based on the dynamics of the activities and based on the people in the positions. We're going to be notified about appointments and reappointments. We're going to have to review the stipend table every year, or the salary levels every year if they're not tabulated, the stipends. I'm not supportive of just automatic increases simply because you've been there longer. That's-
Can you tell me where you see an automatic increase because you've been there
In
longer?
the policy?
No, the stipend tables give it.
But it's not part of the policy.
It is, it says, the table found on the, under compensation is applied in determining the stipends for all co-curricular advisors, extracurricular advisors, and athletic coaches. So I looked at these
Oh,
tables,
okay.
and these tables provide automatic increases if you're there another year.
How is that?
That was how it was presented.
No,
No,
that was a
That was a
proposal.
proposal.
That
We
was-
haven't changed that.
Yeah, we haven't done that. It was a proposal. Do we want to look at that in order to retain our coaches? And the thought was that was more
Okay, so they
challenging.
don't automatically
No.
move?
Nope.
The only thing that happens
Thank you.
is
No,
the
no,
freshman
I-
class
I-
advisor might change to the sophomore class
I thought that
advisor.
was baked into the table.
No,
No.
not at all.
No. Are you good now?
Yep. thank you.
Okay. All in favor? 6-0.
Thank you.
Great.
With that amendment of the getting rid of the as necessary?
Yeah,
Yes.
well, this was a first read, so you
This is
made
the
the,
first read?
right, so you made
Oh,
those
okay.
suggestions, so we'll take them back to policy and then we'll change them, and then we'll bring back a second read.
Thank you
Okay,
for-
so we need a motion to accept third reading of JLCJA, Emergency Plan for Sports-Related Injuries and Additional Protocols for Athletics Participation. Motion, please. Moved by Tom,
Second.
second by Kate.
Do we want to adopt?
Oh, sorry, did it say adopt?
No, it
No.
didn't.
Doesn't
No, I
say-
said to accept the third reading and adopt.
It just doesn't say it on the policy.
In my outline, it says to accept the
I'm
third
sorry,
reading and
no,
adopt.
It's probably.
Does it not say it on here? It
does not say it on
here.
mine.
Okay, so
That's
the
okay.
motion that I just read is to accept third reading and adopt.
Okay.
And I believe, go ahead, I wasn't at
No,
policy. I don't
no
know.
changes
No
are brought
changes.
forward.
Okay, so, go ahead. All those in favor? 6-0.
Thank you.
Oh my God, I feel like you're like if I had had a
Let's go
brother,
for
it
this
was like a
one.
typical brother.
Good thing or bad thing?
I didn't have a typical brother, so, okay, I didn't, so you never made fun of me. Okay, to see what action the board will take, okay, sorry, split the page, so many notes.
JLDBB.
Okay, I need a motion to accept first reading, waive subsequent readings, and adopt policy JLDBB, suicide prevention and response.
So moved.
Moved by Tom,
Second.
second by Krista.
Okie doke.
Janae.
So the reason we are going for first and adopt is we just adopted this less than a year ago. However, there was a change in the law that we've already put into place, which is section 5, Roman numeral 5, about student identification cards. So the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline shall be labeled on ID cards and include the telephone number, National Suicide Prevention Lifeline 988. Prior to the start of each school year, the superintendent shall certify the contact information is accurate and up to date. So this year, we issued to all 6th through 12th graders an ID card the start of the school year with this information on it, and so this just represents current practice, which is the law, but there's.
Did you call the number?
I may need to.
Okay. So, all those in favor?
Can we record this date as
6,
the date we
0,
did it first and adopt?
0. Okay, great. At this point,
So my question was, how do you certify that it's corrected up to date? I'm just curious.
the number you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the easiest way is to
It's the
call.
national number. All right, so, we need a report out from the process observer, and then we'll go into non-public.
Excellent meeting, a
Quick.
little bit long, and, but very good discussions, other than the dismissal of our middle school principal.
Great, thank you very much. At this point, we need a,
So moved. A motion to go to.
I need a
non-public
motion to go into
session.
non-public session pursuant to RSA 91-A:3 to, I think it's, is it A? Dismissal, promotion, compensation of any public employee.
Is it A competition?
A. Is it compensation? Is that what it is? Is it A or is it?
Competition and reputation.
A
A and C.
A and C. A and C.
So moved.
Moved by Tom,
Second.
second by Krista. Roll call starting with Tom Enright.
Come on.
Cindy, I.
Krista, aye.
Holly, aye.
Tom, aye.
Kate, I.
All right, so that's 6-0. We're going into non-public at 8:59. This should be quick.
And we will likely.
Really quick.
No public
We
hearing.
will adjourn.
Yes.
Yes.
Are we relocating, Andy?